Welcome everybody. How are you all doing today? I hope you guys are doing really well. I am currently doing a MogTalk episode 107. I haven't done it in quite a while, and I'm currently in Ukraine, so I'm gonna have a few issues here. So I apologize for any bad internet issues. If you guys are unfamiliar with what MogTalk is a show based around the Final Fantasy XIV community, bringing members in to talk about Final Fantasy XIV from anything from checkpoint racing to Savage rating. And I want to make sure we introduce our guest here, who is a very, very special guest today, Mr. Layla. How are you doing, buddy?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on and putting the show together kind of last minute.
Yeah, of course, dude. Like the only trouble is that, like, again, this is all on my work laptop, so I'm gonna have to delete all this stuff off as soon as I'm done with the show. So if they ever looked at my work laptop, they won't be like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Just put it all in the recycle bin and hit delete, dude. Solves everything.
I'm sure, but I gotta uninstall like OBS and everything. I gotta make sure there's no traces, man. Like I gotta be thorough with it. But we'll make it work. Layla, if you guys are unfamiliar with Layla, let him kind of tell you who he is. You got a little bit of history here, Final Fantasy XIV,
right? So I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV since beta phase 2 at the relaunch of the game when we were born. Frosty and I have done a couple shows together now, so this is I would say what would this be? Was this my 4th time?
No, way more than that. I would have to say.
Well, we'd be counting the FanFest episode.
That would be the 100th, that one, 6? And then I would say closer to 6.
Also, it's probably 6. So I've probably been on MogTalk about 5 or 6 times now. So, it's always a pleasure being on. I'm glad to be here. And like I said, I've been playing Final Fantasy for upwards of, I guess it would be close to going on 4 years now.
Is it?
Yeah, I think beta was the summer of 2013. So upwards of 3.5 to 4 years. I have been rating at I guess what people would deem a hardcore level since Second Coil Savage, I would say. And around patch 2.5, I got together with some of my buddies from Collision and Death and Taxes, and we founded the free company Elysium, and I've been a part of Elysium for the entirety of Heavensward, where we had all the adventures through Gordius and Midas and Creator together, and the successes and stumbles that went along with that.
Yeah, a lot of success, I hope. I think, I guess you could call yourself hardcore, right? I mean,
for what?
For Final Fantasy, you could kind of qualify. I mean, I was thinking closer to midcore.
In terms of what I'm doing right now?
No, in terms of playing the game and being rating in general throughout the last few tiers that you've done.
If I was going to pick something, I would say 16 hours a day is probably more hardcore than midcore. So.
Okay. I was trying to get you, dude. I was trying to. Okay.
You're not going to get me there.
Okay. Well, dude. So for all those who don't know, again, I'm currently doing work out of country in Kiev, and I have been for the last 3 weeks. During this time, there was an event for Stormblood that happened, which a lot of people should be familiar with, and they're releasing a lot of information on today because the embargo got lifted. And I couldn't go to the event because I was out here in Ukraine. And so I felt like I needed to make sure someone who definitely could go out there, absorb it, and 1, deserved to be out there, 2, would make great use of his time out there, could go out there. And so I invited Layla here to go out to the event over in San Francisco.
Yes.
And again, man, I really do appreciate you doing that.
Well, pause. You're not the one that gets to say you appreciate it. I'm the one who appreciates your opportunity that you gave to me. So this is my public appreciation announcement to Frosty for letting me go and represent MogTalk at the event.
Oh man, I don't know if there's really a better person to go out there. I think with your level of detail of learning the game and being interested in what different aspects of the game work, at least in rating, you are super useful. You've got more information from there.
Oh, I'm glad I'm useful to you,
Yeah,
Ross.
you're very useful. You're a useful guy. Okay, I'm just gonna say that.
Okay.
And so, again, when you went out there, I kind of want to get a little bit more information because I wasn't able to go out there, right? So I want to talk to
Sure.
you, and I want you to kind of give me the rundown of how the event went.
Sure. So the event was actually conducted very well. At least from our perspective, I don't know. From our perspective, it was pretty seamless in terms of how things unfolded throughout the day. I'm sure it was probably a bit more stressful for the people putting on the event, but they can know that from our perspective, everything went pretty smooth. I think I was on day I was on day 2. So the event was split up into 2 days, and the first day of the event was more, um, at least from what I gathered, it seemed to be more media focused in terms of the crowd, and then the second day was more so geared towards content creators and streamers and stuff. At least that's what I viewed. So people like Mr. Happy, Ms. Tech, Mary, Ethis, we were all day 2. So that was like the crowd that I was a part of. The event was around, let's see, we got there, I want to say around 9:30 in the morning and left around 5:30 in the afternoon. So, about 8 hours, I would say. And, as obviously everybody's aware, we got a bunch of hands-on time with Stormblood and some of the upcoming changes. And, it's kind of, I guess, one of the big highlights of today's show for you. We'll be going over some of that stuff. But I think one of the things that I'm most, I think, proud of from the day and the event was we were given interview time with Yoshida. And it was essentially, for all intents and purposes, one-on-one interview time. We did it in pairings of 2, but there was so much attention to each interviewer that it was practically it felt like a one-on-one interview. So I think that's probably the stuff that I got out of that interview is probably the thing that I'm most proud of for the weekend.
That's going to be a highlight of the show. That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and we'll go over that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean we're going to pretty much that's our special focus here. I mean everyone has a lot of information from the event, but only we have that interview information. That's ours.
Yeah, I hope that I think that people will find that some of the stuff that I got from that interview interesting. It's nothing super groundbreaking in terms of how it affects their daily life, but it's stuff that I really didn't expect him to answer actually. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean, like the last time I sent that email interview over to him, and he came back with some pretty good answers. I feel like he's just not being asked sometimes the right questions.
I mean, when it comes to like the FanFest stuff and like the live Q&A they do, I mean, a lot of times there's stuff that I wish that people would ask, and then those things never get asked. So it was really awesome and a really special opportunity to have the ability to ask stuff that I've always wanted to ask. So.
Oh man, I'm glad. Again, I'm glad that you were out there to ask those questions because I can trust you to ask the right questions. I didn't even know you were going to have an interview. Honestly, I thought you were just going to.
Right. So you on the off chance that I did get an interview, you gave me the list of potentials that I should look for, and what ended up happening is at the beginning of the event we kind of opened with with what is essentially a keynote, and in that opening preview, we basically got the information that you guys got from the live letter in terms of like the job ability video. The preview video that they showed for the new job actions. Sorry, my dog is going ape bananas in the background.
I think it's fine. Yeah, I don't think it's too bad.
Yeah, she had breakfast already. I don't know what she's whining about. She's already had a walk. Like she doesn't need that much privilege in her life. No, I'm just kidding. I love my dog.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so like in the opening little keynote, we got information about like the stuff about the jump potion that people have seen now, and we also got a bunch of PvP changes, and a a lot of the stuff that you wanted me to look out for and try to get answers for was actually answered in that opening preview. So when it came time to the interview and I was thinking about stuff that I would want information about, I sort of had to ad lib as I was going. So it was a little disorganized in my delivery, but I think my general feeling is that I probably asked what I'd want to hear about.
Yeah, no, I think you did. I think you had asked some pretty good questions from like what I've heard from it. So, I mean, I had absolutely no clue what they were going to do today.
Well, I think a lot of us didn't, and it's probably by design, honestly. Like they didn't want a ton of that information actually out there until the day of the event.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty cool that they did this event as well. I mean, they brought a whole bunch of people in. Like, I don't think they've done anything this kind of open towards the community members before. Like the people in the community making content out there, working with the players and everything else.
Yeah, so they've done it for media, obviously, in the past. You know, they had the I think they had a Realm Reborn media tour.
Yeah, in Europe, I think, right?
Yeah, and I don't
know if they had it more than just Europe, though, did they?
I think they also had one for Heavensward as well. I think the Heavensward one was Europe.
Oh yeah, that's the Europe one. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Realm Reborn one I think was NA as well. If I remember, I don't know. I wasn't part of it, obviously. But I know that some people at the event did sort of highlight that stuff like this is something they want to try to figure out how to do more of in the future, bringing in like you know, community heads and stuff to do these sorts of things. So, you know, maybe, I mean, if they feel that this event went well and stuff, maybe that's something we can see again in the future.
Yeah, and I hope it encourages more people to be more involved with the community too. I mean, like the community team has been more in touch with the community than ever within the last year. So, I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't think the stream's dead, but I just gotta make sure. Okay. All right, good. If it's not dead, then that's fine. I got to be careful about it because again, it could drop off. We're gonna have drop frames for sure, 100% drop frames. But we're just gonna work through it. And I'm gonna have a recorded version of this, and we can just post that up later with no stutter. So
sounds good.
So if you're ready for it.
I just texted somebody to take care of the dog, so we'll see if she comes.
Give her the dog now. I'm tired of hearing skin MogTalk. There's like 10 people watching. Okay, so my question for you, not my question. I guess we can go ahead and go into the questions. Is kind of what I mean. If you want to just start that up and just kind of discuss it. You had how many questions?
So we got time for about 5 or 6 questions. So I tried to ask what I felt were some of the things that I was most interested in, and stuff that you would probably want to hear about as well. And I got, like I said, it's kind of disorganized.
I mean, we can go in whatever order you want to with this. If you want to go from the beginning to the end, or the most interesting to the least interesting, or least interesting to most interesting.
I got about 5 questions answered. Some of them shorter than others. I'll try to do it least interesting to most interesting.
Okay.
I think that's probably the best way to do it. I'm trying to decide. Let me just look at them real quick and decide which of these 2 I think is the most interesting. Because 2 of these are very interesting to me, and I sort of prefaced that I actually didn't think that he was going to say anything. It was one of those situations where I was like, okay, if I leave the event without asking, I'm gonna regret it. I'm gonna feel like I messed up. Yeah. But I also know, okay, he's not gonna answer this question. There's no chance he's gonna say anything.
But I mean, if you don't try,
but then he actually answered it, and I'm like, oh, hold on, let me write that down twice. So yeah, I got about 5 questions here. One of the first things that I asked, I guess I should say that probably the reason I asked this was because of you. Going into the event, I know that you wanted me to ask about some PvP stuff.
Yes.
And a lot of the PvP questions got answered like really early on in the event with the opening panel. So I sort of tried to build off that and not ask something that was kind of redundant. So I sort of asked like a sweeping question of, I asked him, are there any future plans for PvP content that has not already been discussed today that Yoshida would like to see? And The answer that I got was, and by the way, I'm going to be paraphrasing these answers because as far as direct quotes go, I don't have specific direct quotes, but I sort of paraphrase everything that the translator gave me. And in response to that, he said that look, this was an interesting one. So he said that for 4.0, they wanted to create content where two forces were battling against each other with a theme of brute justice. And unfortunately, they didn't have time. However, there's more info to come about something like this in the future. And I thought that was like such a weird reply, because I think brute justice, and I've tried to think about how can brute justice possibly fit into anything PvP related.
Yeah.
And so I have no idea about that. But he then went on to talk about how, you know, there was more info to come out about, you know, there's clearly some new content that they're working on that they didn't have time for, in regards to maybe some new game type, maybe some new PvP mode. But they also go ahead.
No, I was just thinking like you said, that's a really ridiculous statement. It doesn't really add up to anything that I can think that it would add up to, besides trying to, I mean, maybe add PvE into the PvP. But
so yeah, I that was where my thought initially went, is maybe this is some sort of like PvE VP that he was alluding to. This is probably the one question I didn't get specifics on, because I felt like it was just gonna be lost in translation. And at the end of the day, the takeaway here is that there are new game modes that they wanted to implement that they haven't been able to yet. So they're probably going to be something that we'll see in the future. I think that's probably the big takeaway here. He did go on to say that one of the things that they dislike is how the current PvP roulettes work, and that one of the things that we'll probably be seeing in the future is changes to these PvP roulettes, and similar to maybe how other games work, where there's weekly cycles of which roulette is available. So maybe 1 week is like a Seal Rock week. So it's funneling everyone into the same game type and the same roulette to maybe sort of alleviate some of the queue problems that the game has right now in regards to PvP. So I thought that was actually really good.
No, that's actually, hopefully that will help out alleviate the whole, Jesus, yeah, the whole PvP waiting forever situation that most people are complaining about all the time. I saw this message in chat. I just want to bring it up. He said that apparently in the JP media event, they released information about old raid bosses popping up as mounts that you can ride during PvP. But I mean,
that's interesting.
I mean, is that just like
never expected that?
Yeah, like I'm trying to think about how that would actually play into everything. If you did that, would it just be a cosmetic thing, or are they going to do siege mode? And you're going to have like stuff you can, like, so, you know, WoW does PvP with siege mode, right?
Like vehicle combat is what you're getting at.
Yeah,
it's possible. I mean, they could do whatever the hell they want with that. I mean, I was not expecting that to be what he was referring to. Riding around a big brute justice, like having a Megazord battle with somebody.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And you have like 5 functions on there, and one's like rocket punch or something like that.
It could very well be what he was getting at. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that would make PvP super appealing to almost all of the player base, especially raiders, right?
I don't know how serious it would be, but it would be fun to do for sure.
I mean, that's the point.
Yeah. And it also makes it relatable to all the raiders and stuff.
Exactly. All right, well, that's actually pretty cool. I hope that's what it turns into, is that we have some sort of siege PvP with old raid bosses getting on Bahamut and flying over doing Terra Flare or whatever on somebody or something. But I guess we'll see. I appreciate you asking a PvP question. I know a lot of people are upset about PvP right now.
Yeah. Well, you had a long list of PvP interests when I headed into the event, and I felt like, if I leave here without getting any PvP information, I have failed Frosty. Yeah. So
no, there's no way you can fail me, Layla. You've succeeded for the rest of my life inside of my heart. So
okay, I don't think you actually believe that, but as long as I did good by you, then
you did good. You did good.
I done good.
All right.
Okay, so let's look at one of the next things I asked about. I'm going through my journal right now. Okay, so I think I'll save this question for later because it's a fun one.
Okay.
So probably the next thing we should highlight is I asked him actually sort of a question that I think has been, this was sort of more a question from the hardcore audience, specifically I know some members of my FC have like been curious about this topic. I wanted to ask him about the relationship between like damage type vulnerabilities and the current like class synergies of Heavensward, and how it's kind of a polarizing atmosphere in terms of you know, the synergies between disembowel and the ranged right now, and how, you know, #DeleteMonk it sort of spawned as a result because of these synergies and stuff. So I wanted to ask him specifically about those types of relationships, and one of the things the way I phrased it was, I asked him, do you feel that abilities like slashing and piercing debuffs, such as Dancing Edge or Disembowel, are too polarizing for party compositions? And let's see, where did I write down his reply? There it is. Okay, so the way that Yoshida feels is that up to 3.0, it was clearly designed this way, where these damage types are very strong and promote the usage of these class synergies, these putting together like a specific class composition that works well together. Up to 3.0, this was the design intent. And across different MMOs, there are job identities, and job identity is very important. And my understanding of this is when he was telling, when it was being translated, is that they want to make sure that if they were to not have these synergies, these vulnerability synergies, that it would not take away a job's identity. And that's one of their focuses when they're, you know, designing these types of abilities. However, it seems that they are aware that it was a bit too polarizing, and 4.0 does aim to change this. Now, as we've seen, you know, the embargo is lifted today, and everybody's seen all the abilities and stuff. You know, we've seen stuff like Disembowel, Dancing at, or I guess it's now Shadowfang, Disembowel, Shadowfang, Dragon Kick, Storm's Eye, and the Samurai one, I can't remember. You know, these vulnerabilities still do exist. So in regards to 4.0, they haven't really changed how these synergies behave, but we've seen that they've certainly changed how other synergies are behaving. And it's clear, it's very evident that they are trying to make certain party compositions you know, less polarizing in terms of what's viable, what's not viable, what's optimal, what doesn't work at all in a raid. They're trying to make that more flexible, and that's clearly evident in the way that 4.0 is done.
Right.
Despite still having things like Disembowel. You know, Disembowel will be strong. However, you have now a Pocket of Stasis as a cross roll. You have the stat debuffs. You know, the old intellect debuff and the old strength debuff. These are now cross roll abilities on your melees and casters. So as far as party compositions go, things are going to be a bit more flexible. He says, this part was interesting to me. Yoshida himself does wish, however, that the synergies remained as they were in Heavensward, and because he apparently liked how strong that they were. So I thought that was interesting, because I know that a couple players, I mean, a handful of players dislike how strong they were. So that was interesting to hear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like when you go into that whole thought process of synergies and kind of how you know, monks got left out so hard, like completely, because their synergy just wasn't there because the other ones were way better. I mean, they were synergized with Paladin, but Paladin didn't really have as good of a place.
Yeah, I don't even know if you can say they synergized with Paladin. It was sort of like they had an anti-synergy with Dark Knight.
Yeah.
That's really what was happening.
Well, yeah. They made it possible to bring a Paladin. It's like without it being as harmful as it would be without having that debuff down for A12S. And I feel like in the end, the synergies should be there for sure, because jobs should have utility. And some jobs should be unique and say, hey, I bring a good amount of utility, and that's kind of my role. That's how I'm a unique job. I kind of specialize in utility, or that's my view of it at least. And so it shouldn't be taken away, but I don't think it should be so heavy. Like there has to just be a balance there.
So I think that that's what he's really getting at too. Is they tried very carefully to make sure that they don't restrict a job's identity in a party. By, you know, if they take everything away and they homogenize everything, then everyone's identity is the same. And that's something that they wanted to make sure that didn't happen in 4.0, but they clearly did feel that it was a little too polarizing in 3.0.
Right. So this all being said, seeing a lot of this information, do you feel like the preview that we have right now of all the abilities and jobs and everything, that everything is unique and interesting in its own way?
I mean, that's going to be something that is probably only going to be answered once the game is actually live and launched. However, just from the preview, I do like. So let me use the tanks as an example.
Okay.
I like what they've done with the 3 tanks. I don't feel that the tanks are so homogenized that they've lost their identities. I think it's very. I can very comfortably say that. Each tank has its own unique flavor right now. When I think of a warrior, so when I'm thinking of like a party composition right now and stuff that I would take into a raid, I have different pros and cons about each tank, and that to me just tells me that each tank is not there's no homogenization happening here between the tanks. Each tank does bring its own flavor, and I know that's something you want to get into specifically later on in the show. So I'll save what I want to say about that. But I feel that they've done a pretty good job about keeping things still unique in terms of their job identities.
Okay. So people come in and they're a monk and they're like, oh man, I'm a monk and I provide things that only like monks can provide this, and I'm special in a way.
I feel that way. I mean, things will obviously pan out a lot differently than how we all feel as a community right now when we're actually playing the game. I think at the end of the day, you know, you can only speculate so much. Some of the stuff we do actually just have to play with and test. However, using your example of monk, when I think of monk, I see utility on the monk that only a monk brings, and I see reasons and bad reasons for bringing a monk, just like I see good reasons and bad reasons for bringing a dragoon. They're both different reasons.
Right. So I mean that's good, and I know that people are like kind of feeling good about that, but in the end, we need to also understand that there's always going to be an 8 meta, right?
In the sense that there's always going to be an optimal comp, yes, that yields the highest rate DPS.
Yeah,
that's going to happen. I'm sorry to break it to the world, but that's going to happen. And at the end of the day, your world first raiders are probably going to try to abuse that composition.
Yeah.
And, you know, unless they need otherwise. So.
But the hope is, I guess, that like the comp that's below that won't be so far down, and the comp below that is not going to be so far down. Like there's not going to be a huge gap. There's just a little. Yeah.
That's the issue with Heaven's Word well, in my opinion, that's the issue with Heaven's Word currently right now is the difference between the really strong DPS comps and the comps not those are just, the gap is way too large, and it's you know, at least when it came to something like Midas, the gap was way too large. I felt Creator sort of bridged the gap a little bit, but definitely in Gorgeous and Midas it was a problem.
Yeah. All right. That was 2. That was 2.
Oh, that was 2 questions. Yes.
That was 2.
And yes. So
and we're still scaling up, right?
I'm doing my best to paraphrase my awful notes and remain true to.
You're gonna have to send me your notes.
Me. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so next, let's do a fun question.
Okay.
So I asked Yoshida, what is your favorite boss of all of Final Fantasy 14? And I got some really fun answers. I got a 3-part answer.
All right.
So he answered it as a player, as a director, and as a producer. Actually, I technically got a 4-part answer, but the last one is a little bit different. So as a player, his favorite boss is turn 9, Nel Darnus. And that to me, it resonated with me. It just warmed my heart because I totally agree with him.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think as a player, Turn 9 is definitely one of the most appealing fights that they've designed. I think that in terms of like atmosphere, phasing, mechanics, it was a fantastic finish to a tier. Definitely one of the highlights overall in Final Fantasy 14 for me.
I think most people would actually definitely agree with you. I mean, T9 was like a perfect point of the game. When everybody kind of hit that, they were just like, "Holy shit, this is perfect." So okay.
Okay, then that's his opinion as a player. However, his opinion as a director, his favorite boss was Titan Extreme, and what he liked about Titan Extreme was sort of how difficult it was, and the mechanics of like we now have an arena that you can get knocked off of and punished. It's something that you haven't really had to deal with up to that point. You've always been safe inside these little cubbies inside your dungeons, these square cubbies when you're fighting a boss of a dungeon, and then you have Titan Extreme, and it's like, yeah, screw your bumper rails, get off my ledge. So he really liked that introduction to that.
Well, I mean, I like the thought that you just said that he enjoyed the fact that it was a punishing fight. So, I mean, it means that Yoshida enjoys throwing stuff out there that has a challenge to it and kind of surprises people, right?
Yes. As a director, he does.
Right.
However, this segues perfectly into his third response. He says, as a producer, however, Titan Extreme was my least favorite because it was too hard and too difficult for the player base, and many players gave up. So as a producer, it was a nightmare for my job. So I thought that was a really funny response. He says that as a producer, visually, however, his favorite fight was probably Turn 13 Bahamut. Just the theme and the visuals that went into it. Producing something like that was very high up on his list.
Yeah, and I mean, it was also the end of a very important storyline, the most important storyline I think that's happened with the game.
Yeah, I mean it's the game that he sort of recreated. It all revolved around Bahamut, and then to have it all culminate in that final battle was probably something that he really enjoyed working on. So, like I said, so those are sort of the three-headed answer. However, he did sort of allude to some other stuff here, and this part is very interesting, and it's very interesting for one reason specifically, and I didn't want to press him too much about it because I felt like I might be overstepping a boundary. I think in hindsight, I probably regret not pressing him a little bit more, but the interview was already running long at this point. So he went on to say, in addition to Bahamut, Omega Turn 4 visually will be just as spectacular, and that to me was really cool to hear. In terms of music, the visual effects that are happening, Turn 4 of Omega will be potentially be as appealing as Bahamut was. And then he went on to say something that, and this is the part that I didn't want to press on. He said, especially for the players doing Savage.
So that's perfect, right? I mean, that just gives us
thinking colon.
Yeah. So obviously, Brute Justice moves in and gives wings in Savage, right?
So this is something that they said a while ago about. I had thought that they said they didn't want to do any more Savage only phases.
I don't know if I remember
but
them
with
saying
an answer like that, I thought I remember reading something like that. But with an answer like that, are we potentially looking at an Omega Savage only phase?
I'm hoping so, dude.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't want to press on it. I felt I was already a little, pressed for time. But that's what we got right now. That was quite a teaser.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't want to hype it up if it's not true. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, that's good because, I mean, he has had some conversations in the past about, hey, people have pressed him a little bit saying, hey, if I'm doing something harder, I kind of want something more out of it. I don't want it to be the same fight. I want it to be have an extra phase or something cool, a new cutscene or just something. And so hopefully we can see that as an introduction to it. And the thing that's really interesting is that, you know, remember A4? That wasn't even close to Bahamut.
Oh, no. Yeah. No.
So he's saying that the very first final fight is going to be comparable to something that was a final fight in the entire expansion for A Realm Reborn.
Yes, in terms of like visuals, I think is what he was
Well,
getting at.
yeah, of course.
Very appealing fight. Thematically, I don't think anything currently rivals Bahamut. An entire game was destroyed due to Bahamut, so it's gonna be hard to top
that. So that's actually gonna be pretty interesting. I hope that we do see that love to the cinematics and making us feel more into it, just because that makes it that much more enjoyable if it looks pretty every single time.
Yes.
So, and especially if it's a difficult fight, it feels like that those effects have more value to them. I don't know if that's just like a mental thing that I have, but like if something's difficult to get to, and I'm getting there and it has a better effect, and I every time I see it, I feel kind of happy about it.
I mean, I'll share with you. I obviously am on sort of like the world progression side of things here, and I can tell you, even from my perspective, stuff like visuals and raid theme and boss theme, those are all pretty important to my enjoyment of Prague. I know that a lot of my friends, were kind of bored with the target dummy that was A4 and manipulator, but something like Bahamut was, when he's terror flaring every time at that final phase transition. I mean, it really just gets your blood going. It gets the adrenaline going.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, awesome. We're 3 down.
Okay, so the next question I definitely want to save this one for last.
Okay.
Because the next one I want to talk about is, where did I write it down? Give me 1 second to see where I wrote it down.
Waiting. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes. That was 1 second. I do give that.
I do want to remind everybody while Layla is looking a little bit here is that we are going to have another part after these interview questions. Like we're going to be talking a little bit about tanking. And when we get into the tank conversation, I hope you guys don't feel if you're not a tank, it doesn't matter. Because tanking matters a lot to every single person that's in the raid. At least I think.
Yeah, I'll try to relate some of the new tank stuff to how it might affect other party members as best I can. I will, of course, have to focus a little bit more on the tanks, but
of course, yeah,
I'll do my best.
But I mean, like in terms of people being healed, in terms of strategy overall with that, in terms of DPS kind of dealing with the tank, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that tanks bring to the match that everyone wants to know, or brings to the group dynamic that everyone needs to kind of know about. But
I mean, it's important that your group members know what your tank is going to be doing and capable of.
Yeah,
and that's certainly true.
All right. So, did you find it?
Yeah, I got it right here. So, this is one question that I was very curious about, and if you follow me on Twitter, you've known that this is something that I've been talking about on my stream and stuff, and on my Twitter timeline. So I asked them very specifically, Yoshida, how do you feel about the delayed releases of raids by 2 weeks every major patch, similar to how 3.0 and 4.0 behave? As many players that I've personally talked to prefer this style. In 3.0 and 4.0, the raid release is obviously delayed by 2 weeks. Is this something that would be possible for every major raid release patch? And his answer was very interesting. And I really liked his answer. He went on to say, it is not out of the question. However, we have not given it much thought. Yoshida himself did like the idea. And then I went on to highlight how things such as MSQ and stuff, raiders can get extra focus on doing the MSQ, doing preparing crafted gear, stuff along those lines, stuff that's very rushed and you're unable to kind of focus on when a raid is released right at the drop of a patch. So I highlighted those as being like the importance of why something like this would be something that players would enjoy. And he says, yes, we may like this idea. However, he felt that the raiders racing for world first would not like this idea. And I immediately put my finger up. I'm like, wait, it's not entirely accurate.
Well, I'll have you know.
I can pass along some info that many world progression players that I speak to would be very in favor of this, because we really dislike the idea, the headache that is like rushing crafted gear in the middle of progression and racing to your MSQ done and not being able to enjoy the MSQ. So he said, with that in mind, this is an idea that he's going to take back to his team. And, we may hear more about it in the future. So I was really excited to hear that that was something that they actually potentially liked the idea of and we're going to maybe consider. So I really hope that they do kind of look into that and do consider pursuing it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be absolutely amazing. If they're going to put a lot of work into the storyline, it makes sense that they would actually make it not able to be rushed through. Because, I mean, in the end, you kind of. I can relate this to something I heard the WoW developers, they were talking about when they came out with Warlords of Draenor, right? They're like, you can't fly. No one's going to be able to fly for a little bit. And the reason for that is because they wanted them to actually go through the content, experience the content before they rushed over it and were flying over it. Right. And so this kind of relates to the storyline and everything else that you have to do with the game. If you're rushing through all this stuff, then you're bypassing it. And a lot of work. I mean, they don't just fucking throw this stuff out, right? They're not just like, whoa, this is shit, whatever. It's just there to kind of slow you down on your way to Savage. They put work into it, and so they want people to kind of enjoy it. So why not put a delay on it?
Yeah, I think it does. It does. It did. It was pretty apparent in his answer that there was sort of maybe a misconception of how the people doing world progression approach the game. I know a lot of maybe not a lot, but I know that a handful of us do enjoy things like the MSQ and the storyline. I know there are some people who don't give any crap about it,
right?
And they just want to kill dragons. However, I think the one unifying thing that every world progression raider can agree on is that the headache of preparing crafted gear in the middle of progression is more annoying than it is enjoyable.
Yes.
And if we have even a week to do that, that would be just such a load off of everyone's shoulders. So I just really hope it's something that they do consider.
Yeah, I mean, it would also open up more teams to be able to do world first, because I mean, having the resources to make crafted gear that quickly is a kind of denying factor to a lot of people.
I mean, your big FCs are able to do it. Your Angers, your Elysiums. Back when Blue Garter was racing world progression, I'm sure that they had a handle on it as well. Like the bigger FCs are able to do it, but it's very difficult for a smaller team to be able to compete with a organization of 100 people working together on it.
Yeah,
it's definitely. I know that you said earlier in the beginning of the stream that I'm playing a lot of WoW right now, and I know that it's a system that works very favorably in WoW. They stagger raid releases, and it's worked in other MMOs. It has a great history of success.
Yeah, and I mean, the other part to that is when I was tracking World First for E12S, it was kind of interesting to see how many people out there actually want to try for it that are just little tiny groups. Like there's a Solera group that was trying for, not World First, but at least to be competing within the world race in some way. And there's lots of groups out there like that, and there's no way that groups on like Solera, I guess, or anywhere else that are kind of smaller groups of people.
Some servers, just their markets they don't even function at a level that's capable of competing with something like the bigger servers like Gilgamesh or I don't play on Balmung, but I'm sure Balmung's market is
whatever Balmung is.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was a really it was an answer that resonated with me very deeply, and I was really happy that he gave me that answer.
Yeah. So I got to ask you this, of course, while you're talking to him and you're saying a lot of these questions and these raid questions, everything. Do you feel like he had an idea of maybe who you were in sense of being a hardcore raider, someone who did world first and achieved world first a few times?
At least he did. Okay. No, he certainly did. I mean, he I don't think he recognized me by face, but he was familiar with Elysium, and he knew that I was one of the people who helped build Elysium. So that we had that much of an understanding. There was a funny interaction. I shared this with you a little bit. I think it's funny, so I'll share it with the show. Is once the interview was done. Once the interview was done and we were packing our things and leaving, he sort of didn't really pull me aside, but sort of got my attention and looked to the translator and said something, and the translator looked at me and said, he wants to know, are you going to World First Omega? And I'm like, oh my God, the pressure you just put on me, Yoshida. Come on, dude. I'm here for an interview, man. I'm not trying to get this kind of pressure right now.
You got to do it now, dude.
I looked at him. And I said, no, I'm too old.
Did you say it?
And then he laughed. So I thought that was funny.
Well, you're gonna do it anyways, right?
I mean, it's topic for another stream. Topic for another stream.
Okay.
Down. Heel.
Okay. Sorry, dude. All right, I'm back. Yes. All right, so we're into one more question here, and I just want to make sure this is the question you like the most, right?
This is definitely the question I like the most, because this is a question that I know that every single hardcore player listening right now wants more info about, and this is something that I know Chenin was at the event with us, and I remember I was sort of brainstorming with Chenin and Mr. Happy about like stuff that I want to ask before I went in the interview, and I know that like we collectively just kind of notion that he's not gonna give an answer to this. There's no way. Why would he give an answer to this? Like, there's just no way. But it was one of these questions where I would have felt bad not asking had I left the event without asking. And the question was, okay, here it is. I asked Yoshida, so many friends of mine are excited for patch 4.1's quote-unquote super savage. I asked him, has the development team decided on how this will be designed? And if so, are there any more details you can share with me? And I was expecting, no, we're just focused on 4.0 right now. I'm not really at liberty to talk about this right now, but look forward to it at a future live letter. That's not the reply I got.
All right.
So, in his opening statement, he says, as a general rule, he liked the super savage. He liked that I called it super savage. As general, the super savage will not drop a super powerful reward. Loot should reward bragging rights, however. But essentially, what he's saying is we're not going to see like an eye level increase that's going to give you like a power boost, but it should reward bragging rights, which I think immediately what came into my mind when he said that is second coil savage, which is what some people are maybe looking at in terms of how 4.1 is going to play out. Didn't offer enough incentive or reward. We just got a title, and that was it.
Right.
So loot should reward bragging rights, however. In addition to this, it should be extremely difficult. And this was good. Obviously, we want something that along the lines of a super savage needs to be extremely difficult. The general image, yes, the general image of their vision for this type of content is a high-end version of raids that we've already seen. Now, that's sort of an overarching reply. That doesn't necessarily mean that 4.1 would be, say, a super omega. It could be something we've seen in the past even. He specifically stated, and this is something that we haven't got a very specific answer on. We have assumptions up to this point, but he specifically stated that it will not be a full tier. It is a very specific thing that he said. So we have confirmation that it will not be a full tier finally. But this will just be a single fight. Okay. At this point in the question, we sort of got into a back and forth about but my enjoyment in like hardcore rating, and I sort of highlighted that Second Coil Savage was one of my favorite patches, and he said, "Oh, you're going to love this patch then. The designer of this content is the same designer as the Second Coil Savage developed team."
Huh. So
he says,
"Go ahead.
It will be one battle. The difficulty will be similar to patch 2.3.
There you go.
And it is the same designer. And I was at that point, I was super stoked because I love Second Coil Savage.
Yeah. So basically, I guess we could kind of summarize what we're kind of expect. It's one fight, right? One yes. Really hard, challenging fight. And it's going to be something that we've already seen that was kind of a hint that it could be multiple different things. I mean, it could, of course, be Omega, right? I mean,
it could be Omega. It could.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what it would.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing we don't know is we don't know what fight it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
All we know is that it's going to be something that we've seen before, and that it's going to aim for a difficulty similar to Second Cool Savage. And I don't know if you're watching the show right now and you're not familiar with Second Cool Savage. Second Cool Savage, in a lot of people's opinions, is one of the best set of fights in terms of tuning and balance that they've ever made. And the reason that is because it was tuned around max item level gear. And that is so much more easier to tune around than trying to tune for a team going through a progression of gear. Mm-hmm. So they were able to take the gloves off and tune everything to the maximum value that your gear can handle. And that's why Second Coil was so fun. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's how they need to introduce challenging fights into the game. And doing it into 4.1 instead of 4.0 is an amazing idea, because you're like, hey, 4.1, here goes to some casual, cool content, then something to just pound your head up against and have a serious competition of trying to, well, not competition of beating it, but a challenge, right? And so you're trying to challenge yourself going forward with something that's tuned around the max level gear, and so you're not going to outgear it. And that's what happens with a lot of the Savage fights that we've been dealing with, is that you'll eventually outgear it and you're skipping puddles, right? A12S with no puddles, it's like a joke to me.
yeah. So I mean, we'll see what it ends up being. All I know is that I'm really excited for it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I want to emphasize this too, because you said you're really excited for it. I would like you to talk about what your experience has been since clearing A12S a little bit. I mean, you don't have to go like too dark or deep into crazy things, but I mean, like, kind of, what has your mindset been since beating A12S?
Real quick before I answer that, the one thing that I did want to add to what I said.
Yeah, we're back on stream.
I guess if you crash again, we just go without recording.
Yeah, we'll just stop the recording if it gets bad. I don't know if it was just overheating, or I mean, it looked like the computer completely crashed, but I don't know if that was because of heat or whatever it was. Maybe I hold it up.
No worries, man.
All right, you left off on, there's one thing that you wanted to add to it.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Okay, so we were segueing into, so you were had initially asked me about how I feel after A12S, but the one thing I wanted to highlight before we moved on to more topics is yes, the 4.1 info is very exciting. However, we're still focused on 4.0. Like 4.0 hasn't even come out yet, so we need. I sort of wanted to make sure that the hype remained on that, and so I didn't want to press any more info about 4.1. So right now, 4.1 is the focus, 4.0 is the focus, and 4.0 is their focus. So, but we know that 4.1 is going to be good.
So. Yeah, we know 4.1 is going to be super exciting, just because they're not just, because that was such a weird design.
It was a big question mark, yeah.
Because when they're going like, hey, let's hit this type of raider every 6 months and this type of raider every, I guess they hit casuals every 3 months, right? But they really hit them hard every 6 months. I don't know.
Yeah, like the filler patches that weren't really sort of adding much for the players who were,
they wanted a challenge. They wanted to play a game with a challenge to it, and I mean that sucked. But now it's exciting to kind of see that they're going to be doing that, so we still have that challenge incoming at least every few months. But okay, a focus on 4.0, and I mean, having all the experience you've had since A12S all the way until that event. Let's talk about that life. I don't know what's the best way to call that. What's the best way to phrase that?
I don't know. I guess
the life cycle of your interest.
Oh, okay, sure. So I mean, yeah, I mean, so I obviously, this is my opinion. Obviously, I didn't care too much for how Creator behaved. I've already beat it to death on other videos and streams that I've done. I sort of am kind of done with Heaven's Word. Stormblood is what I need. I'm checked out of Heavensward. I want new content and sort of a reset button on how the game is currently. I think that right now, I think that Creator was sort of the straw that broke the Heavensward back. It's just there were a lot of changes that led up to 3.4 that just sort of started to snowball things out of control a little bit in terms of rating. So it's Stormblood is coming at the perfect time. It's a reset button when I feel that the game does need a reset button. So I'm really excited for that. In terms of like my overall interest, I'm obviously playing a lot of other games. Not trying to burn myself out on a game that hasn't even come out yet in terms of Stormblood. I've been in school for the last 6 months. I recently just went back to school, and that took up honestly probably 80% of my time. A lot of my friends joke that I live at my campus. I don't live on campus. I commute every day, but they joke that I might as well live on campus because sometimes I'm there for 12 to 14 hours of a day. And I've actually slept in the library there, so I might as you could say that I do sleep on campus sometimes. I've definitely taken naps in the library.
Hardcore education.
Yeah, it was an adjustment period because I've been out of school for a while now due to having to take care of some family stuff a few years ago. But so my focus has been that. Stormblood's coming out in the summer, though. I have more time that I can focus on that. I've been playing WoW a lot, which you already alluded to. So I think going forward, I'll be trying to balance my commitments in WoW with what I want to do in Final Fantasy, and also my commitments to my education and work life. So I've got to now find a way to balance that three-headed dragon. So that'll be the new task going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, like going into I guess Stormblood and seeing that event, has it made you like excited, or were you just like rejuvenated by just seeing that?
Oh yeah, for certain. It was one of those things. So I joked maybe a little bit with you about and some of the other people going to the event that leading up to the event, I was like playing it off like, no, it's not gonna get me super hyped. I'm not gonna be like logging back on Final Fantasy every day, getting ready for Stormblood. That's just not gonna happen. How naive I was.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. What a joke. Because as soon as the event was over, the first thing I did when I landed from my plane and got back to my home, was I logged on Final Fantasy 14 for the first time in like 3 months, and ran roulettes to do a relic weapon. Like, I mean, this is stuff that I just don't do. Like, hype was at a maximum. And it was just killing me because I couldn't say anything about it. So I had all this bottled hype that was just wanting to explode out of me, and it was driving me nuts. So today is like the best day ever because I can actually share my excitement and hype with everyone.
Yeah, just let it flow out, man. Let it all kind of just flow out of your body. And so when we talk in terms relative to A Realm Reborn and going into Heavensward, and then we talking about we talk about now Heavensward going into Stormblood, how much of a difference are we looking at, do you think?
In terms of actual gameplay?
Well, in change and things to be excited for in the development.
Okay, so I mean, I shouldn't say everybody. Maybe there are people that aren't. There are a lot of job changes that are going to be happening, specifically to the jobs themselves, but also to the way that the combat UI behaves. Right now it's just a simple MMO, Western MMO UI of you have action bars and you have unit frames and you have a world map. I mean, that's really the Final Fantasy formula right now. However, we're going to be having job-specific UIs that are related to the core mechanics of your class, and this is new. This is going to be new to Final Fantasy and specific to Stormblood. Each job has its own unique UI, and if you've been following the Stormblood hype, I'm sure you're well versed in these by now. But if you haven't, go check them out. Each one does a thing that's very unique to the class, and is sort of a way to track the class's resource and how to manage it and stuff. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make resource management a little bit more streamlined as compared to how it was in Heavensward. A lot of the this is a good point to make. This
Mm-hmm.
is how I felt. This is how I felt leaving the event. Going into the event, I had the fear in the back of my mind about the things that they've talked about in their live letters of we feel that Heavensward was too difficult. We feel that jobs were too hard to play. So we're going to be making them easier. You know, obviously people hear easier and they think, LOL, they're going casual.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the event, you know, with that in the back of my mind, like, oh, I hope that it doesn't end up that way. I can say from my experience, I left the event not feeling that way. I left the event actually feeling that the game was not much more easier to play than Heavensward. And some things, some aspects of some jobs, I felt were more difficult than Heavensward. What I've been basically classifying Stormblood as is what was difficult in Stormblood, or what was difficult in Heavensward, is now easier in Stormblood. However, there are new things in Stormblood that are difficult, and I think that's the best way to summarize it. You know, what was hard in Stormblood, or sorry, what was hard in Heavensward was, you know, managing your buffs and your CD timers and keeping track of them, and the how they the relationship between those with your class's resource. Stuff like that is more streamlined and easier. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have visual indicators on your UI of how to manage these and how to keep track of them.
Mm-hmm.
However, we have a lot of interesting new job synergies between the abilities, and some of them look more difficult to manage than some of the synergies we had in Heavensward. So I do not feel that the game is dumbed down to to some casual MMO. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that some things are easier and some things are harder.
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting, and I'd like to just make my own little note on this too. It's when you're making things easier, I think we're also talking about quality of life too, right?
Yes, it definitely,
Um,
there's high focus on quality of life in
yeah.
Stormblood.
And so when people are playing the game, there's things that hardcore players make easier by using programs to make it easier, right?
Okay,
Uh,
sure. Like specifically, okay, I wouldn't
ACT.
name drop it. Yeah,
It's
ACT.
fine. Yeah, yeah. And so people are using that, and so they're making their life easier. And so some of
Mm-hmm.
these functions, if you add them to the game, like if a boss called out and it said in a fight right now exactly what mechanic was happening, the same way that
Uh-huh.
it did, are you making the game easier? Are you just
Or
you're
is it
just
just like a quality of life thing? Yeah, I mean, at
yeah.
that point, you know, if players are already utilizing you know, programs that do that stuff for them, then no, the game's not going to be any different for them.
Yeah.
I mean, if Brute Justice literally turns around and says, you know, super jump on Muni,
Yeah.
then I mean,
Literally the
that
exact same thing that
it's the
he's
exact
doing.
same as what an ACT trigger just told you. So
Yeah, and so if they can manage the UI easier for you to see what's actually happening with your buffs and kind of how you're going to react that to the game, and you have your own little management bar, and it's graphical and it looks very interesting to look at, you're going to be able to play better, and it will be technically, I guess, easier,
mhm.
but not because the game is less difficult to play. I guess is that I don't know. That's kind of a weird way to say that. I guess.
I think the best way that we can think about it is just that quality of life is made a lot uh, more we have a much broader access to a better quality of life in terms of our gameplay, and some of the synergies and relationships between abilities and jobs are
Mhm.
the same, if not more difficult to manage now.
Yeah. So that's
Now,
exciting.
granted, I I, sh- I would be ignorant if I were not to highlight the fact that this is coming from somebody with 2 years of Heavensward experience and 2 years of Heavensward practice. So maybe
Mhm.
some of the things I see in Heavensward, which are sort of uh, um, easy to me by this time,
Mhm.
um, maybe I'm sort of blind to how difficult they were initially, because we're now 2 years into Heavensward, almost coming up on 2 years, and maybe this is sort of like a rose-tinted glasses scenario where some of the things were actually much more difficult than I remember. But
Mhm.
for the game right now and my experience with Heavensward right now, I didn't feel that the game was very dumbed down. No.
Okay, good. I mean, like it is difficult for a new player getting into the game and then figuring out someone who's not like I guess a MMO specialist. I guess is a good way to put it. They aren't thinking about the factors of latency. They're not thinking about the factors of weaving in your OGCDs perfectly so they don't cut into your GCDs. I mean, these are things that are kind of difficult to learn, and so there's other factors in there. And for you, it's easy, but for I guess another person coming into the game, they have to learn a lot of stuff. They're not just learning the basic abilities, right?
Yeah, and I also was joking the other day that if you know how to play one Western MMO, you know how to play them all because they all kind of behave the same. So yeah, they're also dealing with that fact as well. But I do feel I think that the game could definitely does benefit from a quality of life adjustment. So there are some things that were just very archaic about the game, and it's nice to
like
see
PlayStation 3.
I mean, you said it, not me. I don't need that pitchfork in my life. But
okay. I got you. So that's awesome, man. Like, I think that it's good. Everything that you said is really great. It's really interesting. But one of the most interesting parts is that you're still interested in the game after being such a hardcore player of the game, and not being jaded yet. Right? You're not like you're actually excited. So that's what stands out the most to me, to be completely honest.
I was worried that I was going to get jaded, but yeah, I think I'm definitely excited for Stormblood, and I think a lot of my excitement is sort of the fact that this is a new game and it's really easy to be excited for. But I do genuinely feel that they've done right by what the community wants in their design of Stormblood. I think that a lot of what people wanted has been implemented. Not everything, obviously. There's always going to be that one ability that they took away from somebody's job that they're going to be upset about. There's going to be that one class whose rotation got neutered by 3 buttons. That's going to be unavoidable when you have a new expansion. But overall, my opinion of the game is that they did right by what we want.
Okay, good. All right, so this next little part here, I just want to talk a little bit about tanks in general because, I mean, Layla, you like tanks, right?
They're okay.
Yeah, they're all right. I personally like tanks a lot. I played Warrior as my first job when I got into this game, and then I played Paladin afterwards, and then I did a rotation between a whole bunch of different jobs, and I came back to Paladin in the end, even though it's the worst job, right? But it's fun, and I'm excited to see what's coming what's coming to it in Stormblood. And I mean, I like the fact that they focused on balancing it all out.
Yes.
So let's go into that a little bit, Layla. Let's talk about tanks a bit. I'm hearing a slight echo for some reason. I don't know why.
From my end or your end?
I think it's from your end there. From me when I talk. Do you have a headset on?
I do have a headset on, but I can turn down the headset.
Do you just like my voice so much that you want to increase the volume so loud that it goes into your mic?
All right, I just halved you, so.
Okay, that's better.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm surprised you could hear that, actually.
Yeah, it was weird. I don't know.
These are closed headphones, so.
Really?
Yeah, they're closed headphones.
All right. Okay, so
that's impressive.
I don't know. My computer's just amazing.
As we've seen.
Yeah. It's so far, it's crashed once so far. Let's see if we can do it again.
Continue with your tank prompt.
Okay, my tank prompt here. So, anyways, tanks again are one of those things that everybody should be kind of familiar with if you want to be better at the game. I mean, you should want to be familiar with general healing and general DPS. And when I did my rotation through Machinist, Scholar, and then back to tank again, my eyes opened up like tenfold. And just because I understood kind of what these roles are doing in the fight, and I feel like people should kind of understand what their tanks are doing too. And it's really interesting to see what's going on with them because they didn't get a new job. So
the tanks didn't, yes.
Yeah, so the focus for tanks is going to be balancing and making them actually a little bit more, I guess, diverse in a way. Do you feel like they've become a little bit more diverse, or is it kind of like homogenized?
Okay, so yeah, we sort of alluded to this a little bit earlier. I think that let's first look at what was wrong with the Heaven's Word formula for tanks. Before I can give you a good answer about that. the problem with Heaven's Ward was obviously the Paladin conundrum. You have a class in Warrior that is so strong in its ability to Storm's Path and flexibly swap between Deliverance and Defiance on a whim. A class like that is so strong in progression that it, for all intents and purposes, became a staple in any serious contending raid team. Obviously, there were Paladin Dark Knight raid compositions that existed. However, I will sit here until midnight if you would like and argue to death that they were not nearly as optimal as if you had a Warrior. So
of course.
Save yourself the trouble so that we can all have dinner tonight and go to sleep at a good time.
Right.
And don't try to debate me on this.
Okay.
I feel that Warrior was very stable throughout the entirety of Heaven's Ward. And that it was obviously a big concern going into Stormblood. When I think of Paladin and the relationship between Paladin and Dark Knight throughout Heaven's Ward, it was really on the onus of the other tank to have those jobs prepared and be flexible with those two jobs. I'm going to use Vox as an example. Vox is somebody that I tanked for a large portion of Heaven's Ward with. I focused on Warrior, and he focused on Dark Knight and Paladin. He was still familiar enough with Warrior to know what I was doing, but his primary focus was Dark Knight and Paladin. And our decision on whether or not we wanted to take his Dark Knight or his Paladin to a fight was largely based on which of the two offered better mitigation for that fight. Paladin typically, anytime you could take advantage of a Paladin Sheltron, was typically and a fight where you didn't need a Dark Knight's Dark Mind. Dark Mind is really strong. It's a 60-second cooldown. It's pretty ridiculously strong for magic mitigation.
Right.
Any fight where you could focus on a Paladin Sheltron being a main source of mitigation, you're probably looking at a Paladin fight. Anytime you want to bring in a Halone to the equation, the 10% strength debuff, you're looking at a Paladin. The biggest roadblock in that discussion, however, is the fact that Paladins were completely trumped by Dark Knights in the DPS department. So a fight where you're strictly concerned with raid DPS and pushing phases, you're not caring about whether you're looking at a Paladin or a Dark Knight. You're looking at taking the highest DPS duo, which throughout Heaven's Ward ended up being Warrior Dark Knight. And I think that was a big concern going into Stormblood. If they want the dynamic back of the fight that you're interested in taking to the tank that you're interested in taking to a fight should be mitigation dependent and content dependent, then they really needed to first and foremost address the DPS disparity between the tanks. And that's the one thing that I don't know if we'll be able to accurately have an answer to until the game launches, because one thing that I want to make sure that the audience to your show is aware is that the potencies of all the tooltips that have been released after the embargo was lifted, these are all subject to change. These are from a build that is honestly over a month old at this point, maybe even more old. The tooltips that you're reading right now may not even be the tooltips that they currently have in their build. These are potencies that could change at any point. So I haven't spent time mathing out the potency differences in what I deem the optimal rotations for these tanks. So I don't have an answer yet as to whether or not this DPS disparity has been solved. I have a gut reaction. However, I don't have any math to actually back that up yet, and that's something that I'll wait till after the game is finalized and released to actually work myself on and work with other people on. All that being said, that was the problem with Heaven's Ward, and that's what I wanted them to address going into Stormblood. Do I feel that they've addressed it well? Yes. If I ignore the DPS disparity for a moment and not concern myself with that and just look at the things like what separated the tanks other than DPS, I think they've done a good job. The biggest elephant in the room was Storm's Path. I don't think there's a single hardcore player out there in the world that anticipated that Storm's Path was going to survive in its Heaven's Ward form.
Right.
It is way too polarizing of an ability. It should have never been the warrior only ability that it was, because if you didn't have a warrior, you weren't a serious raid team. I know that I just triggered probably 5% of your audience.
You're not lying. You're not.
I'm sorry to the 5% of viewers that I just triggered.
I don't know if there's even that many.
Opinion. Okay. Yeah.
Good.
I very much appreciate the fact that they've implemented the Storm's Path mechanic into a cross rule ability with Reprisal. I think that also what I did expect and was not a surprise to me is the fact that this ability does not have 100% uptime. An ability like Storm's Path that had 100% uptime, if you desired it, was kind of a low skill cap thing. I think of all the times I stormed Path during world progression, and it was really not that difficult. It's like, okay, I know a mechanic's coming up that we're really worried about shielding and pre-healing for. I'm really worried about the effective HP of the raid right now. I should probably prepare a MAME so that I can Storm's Path. There's really nothing difficult about that. I like the sort of virus type abilities, the dismantles that are like OGCDs that are shorter. There's short uptime with long cooldown, so it's more of a process of like managing it as a cooldown. Like, okay, I'm going to use my reprisal here, and that means I'll have to prepare for a later mechanic maybe a bit differently. Like that to me is a much more interesting interaction, and in my opinion takes more skill and foresight. So that was a very welcome change. I was really happy to see it. I fully expected it, but I was happy to see it. To your second part of your question, I know I've been rambling.
No, it's Groot rambling. It's not like it's boring, right?
I've been holding all this stuff in for weeks, man.
Yeah.
Like I got a lot to say.
Just keep going. I'm fine with it.
The second half of your prompt here is, do I feel that they've done a good job with sort of keeping the unique flavors to the tanks? And I definitely feel so. One of the things that there hasn't been enough information about up until today was a class like Dark Knight. You know, we saw a lot of stuff from the live later preview about Warrior and Paladin, but we've really been in the dark, LOL, about Dark Knight. And don't shake your head at me. Don't you shake your head at me.
Good job. Good job.
So Dark Knight definitely still has its unique flavor in the sense that the sort of class identity with the blood gauge and how you fill the blood gauge and also how you spend the blood gauge is definitely unique to the class, and it's not really how Paladin or Warrior behave. And I think the difference in the gauges and in the gauge spenders is definitely what separates the three tanks right now. I should probably review how those actually work out. I guess this would be a good time to sort of discuss the gauges. So the Paladin gauge, as people may be aware or maybe not aware at this point, the Paladin gauge is basically, it's called an oath gauge, and it behaves in two different ways depending on which oath you're in. If you're in Sword Oath, and again, let's preface everything here before we continue. This is all information based on a build that is maybe a month old right now. If anything I say has changed, that is the purpose of content being in development watermarks. So,
yes, that's why it's down there in the bottom. So
that's why the watermark exists.
Yes.
If I say anything that isn't how live behaves, it's probably because it was changed. Moving forward, the way that the Paladin Oath gauges behave is you have Sword Oath, which fills every time you deal an auto attack. And I believe it fills at a rate of 5 per auto attack. When you're in Shield Oath, your gauge fills every time you block. And off the top of my head, I actually cannot remember the specific value that it fills by every time you block. It may even be damage dependent, I'm not sure, but I doubt it. It's probably a static value, and I just can't remember the exact value. But the point is, when you're in Shield Oath, you build your gauge by blocking. When you're in Sword Oath, you build your gauge by auto attacking. The spenders for this gauge, and I'm gonna verify this before I say something stupid. I know one of the spenders. I want to verify that the other one is actually okay. It is okay. So there's two spenders that I'm aware of. Sheltron has now been made a 5-second cooldown, but costs 50 oath gauge. Now, this is a spender that is usable in both oaths, however. So you don't have to, depending on which oath you're in, it doesn't matter for the ability that you're spending your gauge on. It's the only thing your oaths do determine is how you build the gauge. So Sheltron is now a 5-second cooldown. However, it costs half your bar. That's pretty. I think that's good. I think that Sheltron is an ability that's always been really strong when you can take advantage of it. And something like this is, if there was like a Sheltron per minute, I think this could potentially increase your Sheltrons per minute. But we'll see.
Right.
There is a second gauge spender, and this is one of the new abilities. And I'll try to keep this as preview as possible since we don't have a final build yet. But this new ability is called Intervention. And for the people who are not familiar with this new Paladin ability, what this ability does is it has a 10-second recast. However, it costs half your bar. It's a targeted ability that you can use on a party member, and it reduces that target party member's damage taken by 10%. And it lasts 6 seconds, and this costs half your bar. However, it has an additional effect. It increases that damage reduction of 10% by half of your Rampart or Sentinel if either of those are active. That is crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because that means that you would. The concern in that whole move is, will this become a useless utility? That's what I'm worried about. Like, I want this to be something that's like, oh man, this is really awesome because I'm not going to take damage here, but I know there is going to be a person that is going to take unavoidable damage that we definitely don't want them to take.
I'm going to paint you a scenario right now, Frosty.
Okay.
Give me this ability on Brute Justice Savage. Say we're running a composition of Paladin Warrior on Brute Justice Savage. Typically speaking, most groups found that like Warrior is kind of a bad example, but just bear with me. I know there's like probably some like World Progression Raiders in chat right now. They're going to hate this example because if Vox is listening, I know he's going to hate this example because he knows that home game doesn't work how I'm about to describe it. But that's okay. Just pretend that it does. Pretend this is a good example. If I'm a warrior and I'm solo tanking the last phase of Brute Justice, typically speaking, it's much easier to manage if I'm solo tanking that phase and we're not bothering with any tank swaps. Place a Paladin with an intervention in that scenario. That Paladin is now an off tank. That Paladin's maybe dealing with the mine, and that's really all they're doing. They're popping a Divine Veil for the J kick. That's really all the Paladin's doing in that phase. Give that Paladin intervention. That Paladin is now able to better help me solo tank by placing an intervention on me, the main tank, and popping his defensive CDs that he doesn't really need to help me better mitigate mechanics. It is an extremely strong off tank ability, and also a pseudo cover if need be.
Well, I guess the interesting thing that you could do is like there's the attacks where it hits 2 people, right? And so
that too. Think of the Hydras from Final Coil.
And so basically, if you guys are sharing damage, you can use 1 cooldown to cover 2 people.
Yeah, that's another great example. I don't know if it's strong enough to maybe replace an entire cooldown from a tank, but it's definitely something that's going to supplement, if not entirely replace. Like it's a really strong mitigation tool.
Right. So that's going to be kind of exciting to see. And I mean, God, what was I thinking? I didn't read through every single tooltip. I'm going to go ahead and say that. We talked a little bit about cover.
Yes, cover. I believe this is a new trait. I haven't played my Paladin in months, so but there's a trait that I saw on the Stormblood build of cover having also reducing the damage that you cover by 10%. So I believe that's a new trait. If somebody can call me an idiot in chat and correct me if I'm wrong, then then sure. But I believe that's a new cover trait. It's been a while since I played Paladin.
Right. Obviously, yeah.
I think in terms of Paladin though, defensively they're in a great spot. We saw the ability that had wings in the trailer where it's like a get behind me, my princess, like I'll protect you. It's like a 15% damage reduction for the entire party standing behind the Paladin. And then it's also a 100% block rate for the Paladin while that's active, but the Paladin can't do anything. I see that as just an extra tank LB for the party. It's gonna be really useful.
No, it's so I'm gonna go and describe to you why I like Paladin at the moment.
Sure.
And usually it highlights itself a little bit better in PvP because that's where all the utility comes in play. And it becomes absolutely amazing, outstanding with the utility. And so that's something I wish was more applicable towards PvE. And so I can see that when they add in these extra moves, they're adding more utility, right? And so
yeah, definitely on the Paladin side of things.
Yeah, two paladins, and so that's kind of their trait. That's what I think paladins are supposed to be kind of known for, is defensive utility tanks,
Yes,
right?
the one snare, however, is you want to avoid a scenario where you have the Heaven's Word conundrum of the DPS disparity between the tanks is so large that their utility doesn't matter.
I
You know,
still think they should have the least damage if you're going to calculate it, but not like, you know, a major amount. But
it can't. What it needs to be, if I was a developer, if I was a designer, and I was trying to balance this stuff, I would design it so that my Paladin utility only reduces my damage by an amount that my party is able to make up by their ability to now be safer.
yeah,
So maybe
reducing
if
healing and making the
you know,
healing damage more.
if healers need to worry less on pre-shielding a party and preparing for a massive AOE or something, you know, that's like multiple GCDs lost, like preparing for that. If a paladin's able to cover that, you know, a healer should be able to make up that damage. In my eyes, if I was a developer, that would be like my ideal world. However, that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that I'm not going to ask them to do that because it's really hard to do. But that it shouldn't be much larger than that.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that's fair. So that definitely gets me more excited, and also, you know, the shield thing looks really cool.
Yeah,
the wings popping out, right?
yeah. There's also so we've talked about the defensive capabilities of Paladin. There are some new offensive capabilities of Paladin. Like I said, I haven't mapped out potencies yet to decide whether or not I do think that Paladin's going to do more damage than it is right now. However, I don't know how
How
that
it's going to
damage is going to
compare?
how it's
Yeah.
going to compare just yet. That'll be something I'll have to do more testing with and paper Final Fantasy. However, let's talk about the new offensive things that they've added to the Paladin kit, because one of them is I think pretty interesting. So the if you're familiar with if you're familiar with the job video, the preview of the job actions in the video that Square Enix released, you saw Paladin sort of casting this like holy looking spell. It was like some sort of nuke of some type, and they were casting it on a boss. And what that ability is, that ability is called Holy Spirit. And let me look up exactly the percentage of MP that it costs before I talk about it.
Sure.
Okay, so it looks like at around level 70, this Paladin has about 7,100 MP, and a Holy Spirit costs 1440. So let me just quickly. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So you have enough MP to cast 4 Holy Spirits in a row. And if you get a few extra MP ticks, you actually move over to the 5th Holy Spirit if you wanted to. However, 4 is the magic number that I was concerned with when I was playtesting Paladin, because there is the last skill that we haven't really talked about, and I hope I pronounced this correctly. It's called Requiescat.
Okay, fair enough.
It is a new OGCD that they gave the Paladin. And what it is it's a 60-second cooldown OGCD that delivers an attack with a potency of 350, and the potency decreases as your own MP decreases. But that's not the interesting part. The additional fact is what we want to focus on here. Increases attack, magic, and healing magic potency by 20% if current MP is at 80% or higher. Well, listen very carefully to what I said. Increases magic potency by 20% if current MP is at 80% or higher. So the big takeaways there are: A, we need to be full MP when we use this ability. B, this buff lasts for 12 seconds, and during this 12-second window, we want to be taking advantage of that magic potency buff as much as we can. Now, if you're familiar enough with Paladin, you know that Fight or Flight only buffs your physical damage. It does nothing for magic potency. So when I was testing the Paladin, what I found was working well was I sort of had this like physical phase, and then I had a magic phase. And in my Paladin opener that I was doing, it was a standard like pot Fight or Flight opener. What I ended up doing was at the very end of my Fight or Flight, my last ability would be an OGCD Requiescat inside that Fight or Flight to give me that magic potency, because directly out of my Fight or Flight, I went into a Holy Spirit spam until I ran out of MP. And I believe it was 4 Holy Spirits, and then my Requiescat faded anyway. So the fact that you can get 4 before an MP part is drained is why I think that 4 was the magic number anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it's a cool little rotation. It was pretty fun. You're getting enough Riot Blades in your Fight or Flight opener that you're going to be full MP no matter what anyway. So using that Requiescat to get that additional buff and making sure that you're over 80% MP is not hard to do.
And Holy Spirit's a cast, right?
Yes, Holy Spirit is a cast. I should preface that.
So that means that you don't want OGCDs kind of off cooldown during that phase, right?
I believe there is enough time to fit in an OGCD in between a cast. I think that Requiescat lasts long enough to do that. So maybe if you have like a Spirits Within or a Circle of Scorn coming back off cooldown, you can fit it in between Holy Spirits. I can't say for sure though. I actually didn't test that. Probably should have.
Why'd I even send you out there?
But Holy Spirit itself is a 2-second cast time, so
okay.
At least 8 seconds of that.
It seems like it would clip, especially if you're East Coasters, right?
In terms of OGCDs.
Well, no, the OGCD might clip the GCD.
It's possible. I mean, you'll definitely lose GCD uptime. I can tell you that. Yes, just because of the way that casted abilities work. Like, yeah, you're going to lose some GCD uptime, but and it remains to be seen until we're like actually mapping out these rotations and stuff, whether or not that clipping is actually too punishing in the rotation. I think that I'm looking actually at these buff durations, and I'm actually wondering if possible if there's going to be a possibility of getting a 5th Holy Spirit in that Requiescat, because you have 2-second cast times with Holy Spirit with a 12-second duration of Requiescat. So
can I try to pronounce that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Rookie scat.
Is that how you pronounce it? Rookie scat?
Require scat. That's what it looks like.
Require scat?
Require scat.
All right, I feel like we're both embarrassing ourselves.
Really I'm happy with that. I'm good with that. No, I'm good. So I do want to mention one thing, if I can interrupt you for a second, Layla. Just with the fill. So when you do a fell cleave, you fill that really well, right? I mean, it's not like you do it and you're like, you do it and you're like, oh shit, fell cleave. When you do Holy Spirit, do you feel that?
No. I mean, Holy Spirit. I mean, it's not. It's kind of a simple animation. It's this little holy ball exploding. But I welcome anything that isn't 1, 2, 3 on a Paladin. Oh, the other thing we should talk about with Paladin is that some of the core combo pairings have changed. Royal Authority is no longer associated with Savage Blade at all. Royal Authority is a follow-up to Riot Blade now. The only thing off the combos off of Savage Blade is Rage Felone.
I guess they listened to us in our conversations about Paladin multiple times on MogTalk.
Yes, what they've done is they've made it so Paladin has a threat rotation. Felone doesn't have a strength debuff component to it anymore. It's strictly a threat rotation. They have a damage rotation in the Royal Authority chain, and they have a debuff dot rotation in the Goring Blade chain. So it's pretty simple when it comes to the Paladin in terms of their offensive capabilities. There's not a lot to think about there. But I do think that there's going to be definitely some interesting usage of a Requiescat, or however the hell chat wants us to pronounce it.
Okay, Rescue Cat.
Yeah, and like I said, I think I personally liked fitting it in as last ability in my fight or flight, since it has no synergy while you're in fight or flight.
Okay. That sounds actually pretty awesome. I mean, as a Paladin myself, I feel pretty excited about that because I feel like I can...
You have an AoE now also.
The AoE, the spinning around AoE, right?
You have a spinning around AoE, finally. You have something to do that isn't flash.
So, is it spammable?
It is spammable. It is just think of it as Paladin Unleash. If you play Dark Knight, it's the AoE around them. It does nothing for threat, however. So you'll still be flashing to generate extra enemy, but in terms of AoE DPS, you now have the ability.
What do I care if I have enemy or not? I just want to get high numbers, right?
Yeah, just let the monk tank.
Yeah, that'll be fine. All right, so now I spin around, which is everybody was asking for that. Everyone thought that almost holy was what that spell was, but I guess
we didn't really know if it was going to be single target or AoE.
Yeah, because it was kind of weird that he was casting on a single target in the trailer that they showed. But so okay, do you feel like we did a good summary for Paladin there, or should we?
I think that's a pretty good summary of Paladin. Okay. Yeah. We sort of touched on the defensive utilities and maybe the strengths of those. I think the intervention ability, which is the 50 oath gauge spender, that mitigates
I mean,
her
are
hard
those the
whenever.
only two that spin go?
Yes, Sheltron and Intervention. I think Intervention is really strong. I think we've sort of highlighted where its strengths are going to be seen in solo tank scenarios and in any scenario where you're double tanking a cleave or something. It's those are both scenarios where it's going to be really strong.
And it doesn't reset when you swap oaths, right?
I had that written down. Does it? I can't remember. I feel like it did a little bit, but I can't answer that right now.
Okay.
I'd have to look. That's in my notes somewhere, but I don't know where it is offhand.
That's fine.
Look. We'll look for that later.
Well, you let
throughout the
chat
day.
look too if they want to.
Yeah, chat can remind me if swapping oaths resets.
Because that would be kind of painful in that sense.
I feel like
halves.
it lost half the bar. Oh, was somebody saying half? I'm pretty sure it lost half the bar.
Okay, so that's kind of a rough move, I would think, because you would have to spin it.
It is and it isn't. I mean, the gauge is not so complicated that it's difficult to build or not build. I think when it comes to flexibility in gauges and swapping stances, I think a class like Warrior is going to end up being much more punished than Paladin, and maybe that's going to be a good segue into the Warrior summary.
Let's get to it, dude.
All right. So obviously, this is my baby, the Job Warrior. This is what I was super excited about to test. And Frosty, I don't know if you've been. I don't know how much video you've been able to watch.
The video like from that you sent me. Where is it?
Oh, right. So I have 40 gigs of that. So I'm talking about the ones that Square Enix released.
Okay.
The 40 gigs of my video that I was not able to get to. I mean, that's blame AT&T for that one. Like,
okay.
I just get an error every time I try. It's just miserable. I have no upload. However, what I'm getting at here is the job ability preview video that they.
Oh yes.
Have you had a chance to sit down?
Yeah,
and watch
the charge, and the multi, the 5 fell cleaves. That's what I remember from.
Yes, that's what I want to talk about.
Okay.
So we do have the charge, and the charge. I'll just highlight since you brought it up. Charge costs 20 of your gauge. We haven't gotten into how the gauge is built yet, or what the hell gauge does. But what that does, that tells you it's not something you can open a fight with. Just want to make that clear before we go on. Obviously, the big topic was, oh my god, he just did 5 fucking fell cleaves.
Yes.
So I'm sitting there in the audience. I was sitting there, I think, with Mr. Happy to my right and Reset from Reddit to my left, and they got to the Warrior, and it was like there was a Berserk, there was some sort of like Kaioken looking ability that's the little Warrior on screen did, and it was 1 fell cleave, 2 fell cleave, 3 fell cleave, and I'm like, wow, that's 3 fell cleaves in a row. How does that work for a set 4 fell cleave? Wait, what? 5 fell cleave. What? So I was just blown. The whole, you could hear like the crowd just begin to gasp louder and louder and louder with every sequential fell cleave, and it was hilarious to see the reaction. You can actually get up to 6 fell cleaves, and I think that's
really
like people really figured that out by now. You can get up to 6 fell cleaves, and it is not just fell cleave. You can also do 6 decimates. So it's pretty funny. You can expect that Warriors, if they desire to, they can single-handedly delete a dungeon pool if they want to. with Hexa decimate with Berserk. It's pretty funny.
Jesus. That's such a weird thing. Like that. I mean, that's a theme between the two jobs right now. Sorry, you got a couple of moves that you spam at a certain point. You hit like a height and you just start spamming, and so it feels weird.
So let me explain like why something like this is possible, because it's just ridiculous that you can do something like that, right? Okay, well it's possible due to an interaction of a few abilities. Let me first go over what these new abilities are. So first and foremost, a Warrior's stacks are gone. We don't have stacks anymore. We don't have abandoned stacks, and we don't have wrath stacks. What we have now is what's called a beast gauge, and you have a deliverance beast gauge, and you have a defiance beast gauge. And I know RIP stacks 2017. They were in a special part to my Warrior class, but they're now gone in favor of a gauge, and I'm okay. It's okay. I was a little disappointed at first, but honestly, after I saw how the gauge is built and utilized and spent, I'm okay with it. what we're going to find is it behaves pretty similarly, with even a little bit more maybe strength than the stacks had. I'll touch on that later. So you have the two different types of beast cage. You have the Deliverance and the Defiance one. Unlike Paladin, they're not built differently. The way that a warrior builds its gauge is through its main combos. And these are the Butcher's Block combos, the Storm's Path combos, and the Storm's Eye combos. And off the top of my head, and I hope I don't get this wrong and look like a buffoon, the Skull Sunder builds 10 gauge, Butcher's Block builds 10 gauge, Maim builds 10 gauge, Storm's Eye builds 10 gauge, and Storm's Path builds 20 gauge. And now, so Storm's Path is the one outlier there. Everything else built 10. Heavy Swing doesn't build any, obviously. It's just like before where Heavy Swing didn't build a stack. And your gauge caps out at 100, I should say. So you have everything but Storm's Path building 10, and then Storm's Path builds 20. Now, why is Storm's Path weird like that? Well, I'll get to that in a second. Let's first talk about some of the new abilities. So Warrior as a whole, comparative to the other two tanks, didn't change very much in its core gameplay, I feel, which I think is good. I think that as strong as Warrior was in Heaven's Word, if they gave them a large set of new tools to work with in Stormblood, I would just think them crazy. Because the class's kit is already really strong. It has an answer for almost everything. Like, it's just God tank right now. The one thing that they did give Warriors was they made Rampart a cross roll ability, and if you infer what I'm getting at is now Warriors have access to Rampart, and it appears from my initial play that this is at the sacrifice of Foresight. I did not see Foresight on Warrior, and I think trading Rampart for Foresight is something that I would classify as definitely a buff.
Oh yeah.
I think Foresight is. I am team Foresight, though. I do give Foresight a little bit more credit than some people do. The armor that Foresight was starting to give, was pretty damn good. However, I don't think you can argue that Rampart is going to be outshining Foresight. So Warriors now have access to Foresight at the cost of now have access to Rampart at the cost of Foresight. So seems like a buff to me.
It definitely does.
Yeah, beyond that, not much changed. We have two new OGCD abilities in the charge attack, and we have this like uppercut that seemed it's just a raw potency attack. Let me pull up the exact value for you. Let me go through my screenshots here. Bear with me.
Hold on. You said they get. So at first, people were saying this, and I saw stuff, but maybe I just didn't see it. They uppercut.
Yeah, they got an uppercut. The skill is actually called Upheaval. It's a 30-second recast, and it has a potency of 300, and the potency decreases as your own HP decreases. So it's like a Warrior Spirits Within, basically. It costs 20 gauge, and it's just a raw damage OGCD. It's literally Warrior Spirits Within. But you uppercut them.
Hold on. I'll be right back.
You just uppercut them.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Let's go.
Okay. So let's continue. So you have the uppercut ability. It's just an OGCD. It's like a Warrior's version of Spirits Within. And then the other OGCD I got was a charge attack that we've all seen in the trailers. It's called Onslaught. 15-second recast, small potency of 100. Costs 20 gauge, but it's a charge attack. It's like Warrior's version of Plunge from Dark Knight. However, the cool thing about Onslaught is it has increased enmity, which I don't think is going to have a ton of play, But it's nice that they have an OGCD that has increased enmity. And when you're charging a mob in a dungeon, you have a small bit of 100 potency, increased enmity, snap aggro. I don't know what the threat multiplier is going to be on it, but we'll have to test that when the game launches. But yeah, I think just nice little OGCD additions. Where you're having a charge now is really nice. However, the big new ability that we want to get to here is an ability that some people expected. However, I don't think we expected it in this form. We've had a way to spend stacks on a buff in Defiance since Warrior's inception. But we haven't had a way other than Felcleave and Decimate to spend our stacks in Deliverance. And what they've essentially done is they've given us a pseudo unchained type ability for Deliverance in the new warrior ability. I think it's called Inner Release. And because there's no stacks anymore, what these abilities do is they cost both Unchained and Inner Release cost gauge instead of stacks. And what Inner Release does is during Inner Release, it's a 20-second duration. During Inner Release, your gauge spenders are reduced by half. So you can kind of see where this is going.
Right.
Currently, in the current version of Stormblood, both Felcleave and Decimate are 50 cost abilities, which if you have a bar of 100, in one single bar you can get 2 Felcleaves. Infuriate is now an ability that gives you 50% of a bar, so if you Infuriate, you can now get 3 Felcleaves. With an ability like Inner Release, and you have that, 1 bar nets you 4 Felcleaves, and an Infuriate nets you 2 Felcleaves. And these are how you're seeing these 6 Felcleaves Berserk combos that are happening in videos and stuff.
Jesus, dude.
Yes, go on. Initial reactions, Frosty. Hit me.
Okay, so this is like the biggest issue that I have in comparison. If I'm going to sit here and just be a baby and complain about like Paladin versus Warrior and all this other stuff.
Sure, hit me.
Like, why do Warriors get all this stuff that makes you feel good, right? It makes you feel like a badass, and then you get Paladin. And it's just like it. Let me
play devil's advocate for you. I think I've never felt tankier than when I have my entire party standing behind me with big angel wings spread across them, saying, "I will save you. Get behind me. You take no damage." Well, 15% less damage. That's about as tanky as you can get, Frosty.
That's true. Okay, so that's
tell me the man that doesn't feel like a man while he's holding his shield up, protecting his friends.
That's amazing. You're right. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that was a good choice. But then when I get into, where I cast a bubble really quick and then I'm done, it doesn't feel right. That doesn't. I do that 4 times in a row. It feels like I'm spamming Flash, which I don't have a good feeling about. I don't like spamming Flash.
In terms of the offensive rotation, yes, Paladins are quite a bit less flashy than throwing 6 spells.
Well, they're very flashy.
Yeah, nice, good one right there. Yeah, I give you an E high five for that one.
Okay.
I won't argue that. I think the Paladin is definitely aesthetically more favored towards the players who really enjoy that defensive the sort of defensive theme of I'm here to protect the party, and hopefully I do good enough damage so that you can warrant my protection.
Yes. I wanted
hopefully my defense is high enough to warrant my protection.
Right, and I wanted them to slap things around with a shield. I mean, that's the thing that I was hoping for.
That would have been cool, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's just me from playing Warrior back in my WoW days, where they had a buff, I think, around Wrath of the Lich King, where they just start hitting things with shields like tons of times, and it was such a good feeling. Now it's kind of gone with Paladin in this game, and I don't know. They need to do more of shields. Get rid of the bubble, make it to where you just pick up your shield, you just slap them, and I'd be okay. I mean that. All right. I'm done.
I do agree that I think that the. I was actually kind of expecting them to do something with you have shield swipe, which I guess is kind of their response to that. But I'm actually going to double check something right now. I don't remember testing much with shield swipe in the in the build that I played. I want to verify that it still exists. Okay, I was testing on a dummy, so it was obviously hard for me to test shield swipe. I want to make sure that shield swipe exists in the same form that it currently
Shield
does.
bash. Shield bash feels so good in PvP, but man, it's
Shield bash, the stun, obviously, you like shove your shield in their face, and it's very satisfying when they can't move for, for however long it lasts for in PvP.
Yeah.
It looks like shield swipe, 15-second recast, behaves in the same way it does right now. Has a potency of 150, so can only be executed after blocking. So you have shield swipe, but if that's not enough for you, then just throw some shield bashes in that raid boss, dude. Waste your TP.
Why not? All right. So we can keep going on Warrior if you want, or if you felt like you hit a good spot for it.
No, I have much more to say about Warrior. Frosty, are you kidding me right now?
Okay.
You think I waited until May 31st to say that little about Warrior? You're gonna need another drink, my friend.
I might need to get one. All right. I'll sit here. I'm ready.
So I've sort of highlighted the interactions between these abilities and why you're able to get something like 6 spell cleaves. We haven't really talked about the specifics of this ability. This is an ability that has a 2-minute recast, so it's similar to Unchained. However, it only costs 20 gauge. This is not an ability that drains all your stacks like it did in Heavensward. I want to kind of break down what I found with the Warrior rotation and sort of highlight what we're going to be experimenting with when the game launches. What is important to preface is Infuriate is no longer usable outside of combat. This is the best news I have ever received in the world. The days of 55-second pull timers are dead and buried. Goodbye. Good riddance. I hate them.
Oh, I know some people who disagree with you completely.
No! Who the hell wants a 55-second pull timer?
Well, I mean, maybe...
No friend of mine. I will tell you what. No friend of mine. If you like 55-second pull timers, block me on Twitter.
Okay. All right.
I was really happy to see that it's not able to be used out of combat. Obviously, we're probably still going to have dumb astrology cards we're waiting for, but you know what? At least it won't be my fault. So the infuriate usage is a bit different, however, in Stormblood compared to Heavensward. One thing that's new about infuriate, and this is really cool, and I really like this. Let me double check a tooltip before I say something wrong. Where is it? Yes, okay. So we have a new interaction between Fellcleave and Infuriate. Infuriate still has its 60-second cooldown. That much hasn't changed. However, each time you use a Fellcleave, and I believe this doesn't pertain to Decimate, and I wanted to find the Decimate tooltip to double check real quickly if I can look for it.
I could pull this stuff on. I can pull some of the stuff. You keep going.
Okay, so I'm gonna head forward with unverified if this works for Decimate as well, but I know off the top of my head that it definitely works for Fellcleave. Each time you Fellcleave, it reduces the cooldown of your Infuriate by 5 seconds. And that is a really interesting interaction. What this essentially does is you're more so than ever mindful about making sure that you're using Infuriate as early as you possibly can while still getting the full benefit of it. And the rotation that I was experimenting with heavily relied on the fact that Storm's Path now gives 20 gauge versus the others gave 10. So if you remember what I said maybe like 5 or 10 minutes ago at this point, the inner release ability, the Deliverance Unchained ability, costs 20 bar. Now this is important because you need 100 bar to do the 6 Fellcleaves. So what you end up doing is you have you have 2 separate berserks. You have a berserk that uses this Deliverance Unchained thing, and you have a berserk that doesn't, because berserk is now a 60-second cooldown, down from 90 seconds. However, it does reduce potency at 30% now versus the previous 50. So you have a lower cooldown berserk, with a 60-second cooldown berserk competing with a 120-second inner release, and that essentially means you're going to have one inner release berserk, and then you're going to have a solo berserk. So you need 2 different berserk rotations for that. And when you're doing the inner release berserk, you really need to be mindful of the fact that Storm's Path gives 20 gauge and the others don't, because the rotation that I worked out was build up your gauge, get it to 100, which is fairly easy to do. Prep a MAME combo so that your next global can be Storm's Path. Spend the 20 on inner release, so you're now down to 80. Storm's Path back up to 100, and then you can proceed to go into your Fell Cleave, Infuriate, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave. Now, there's one thing that as I was saying that I needed to highlight, and I forgot to, is the changes they made to MAME and Storm's Eye. MAME is now your slashing debuff, and Storm's Eye is now your old MAME. It's now your 20%, or it's now your damage buff. So that relationship is important, because what you'll find is by doing that little Storm's Path rotation that I just highlighted, where your first global of your inner release is a Storm's Path, you need to make sure that during those 6 Fell Cleaves, your MAME and your Storm's Eye are not going to drop. So there is a little bit of setup prior to this rotation, in that you need to, before that Storm's Path combo, make sure that you eye, so that your eye lasts for the full duration of your following berserk. So you do a Storm's Eye, then you follow it up with a MAME, inner release, Storm's Path, berserk, Fell Cleave, Infuriate, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, finish off with an eye, and your heavy swing MAME eye for the refresh, and that's your new 9 GCD berserk. That's what I was experimenting with, and I'll be interested to see if anything better than that arises. So that's your one of your berserks.
Mm-hmm.
You have go on.
It's interesting that you've built this kind of I guess you're already ready, even though we know that maybe these numbers are not going to stick. Like you're just hyped to go ahead and do
this rotation. Okay, so I did fall a little bit of victim to getting really hyped about Warrior when I was testing things. It is impossible for me, having the Warrior experience that I do, to not get excited over something like that, and to not try to come up with a cool berserk rotation. I will preface that this only works because Path gives 20, and if they decide to change that before release, which they very well could, this content is not finalized, then obviously we're back to the drawing board. I found that it was very clean, however, in terms of the buff up times. This is a rotation, and the ninjas would love this. If Fold is listening, he's going to love this. This is a rotation that does not, and if Vox is listening, I remember doing speed kills with Vox in Midas. He will love this. This is a rotation that no longer drops Storm's Eye for 1 global. Prior to Stormblood, Heaven's Ward, some of the optimal berserk rotations for warriors, we ended up having to drop Eye for 1 global. And sometimes players like Fold or other ninjas, that 1 global where Storm's Eye dropped lines up with like their duality, their duality. So it's like, feels fucking bad, man.
Yeah.
And I had to move my berserk rotation around to accommodate the fact that that single instance of where Storm's Eye dropped was a big problem. I can happily say that is no longer an issue with these new interactions and new rotations. So it's fantastic.
Fantastic, man.
Yes.
All right. Well, I mean, of course, going into this, did you go into a rotation for all the tanks, or was it mainly just a warrior that you went into a really deep?
I tried to learn the tanks, all 3 tanks the best I could. I think warrior was the one that I had the most instant success with, because it wasn't necessarily difficult to figure out. I think the one thing that I'm going to work on optimizing when Stormblood launches is where my upheaval usage is. It's the upcut ability, because it costs 20 gauge, and I want to figure out where that best fits in the rotation, because using an upheaval takes away 20 from a potential future Fell Cleave. So I need to math that out and decide where it's best going to fit. But I didn't want to bother with that until potencies were finalized.
Right. God damn it.
But yeah, because Berserk is now 60 seconds, then you have like a standard solo Berserk that doesn't line up with your inner release. that you'll basically just be trying to fit 3 Fel Cleaves in instead of 6 because you don't have any release. So the goal will still be fit 3 Fel Cleaves inside of Berserk. However, the tightrope that you'll be walking leading up to that is doing the maximum amount of Fel Cleaves in between your Berserks while still having enough gauge to do maximum Fel Cleaves inside your Berserk. And that will be what players figure out post Stormblood. It's maximizing that resource in between your Berserks. That's what warriors are going to have to figure out.
So let's do a quick comparison here. Let's compare figuring out rotation for current warrior abilities versus Stormblood.
Okay.
It seems much more complicated going into Stormblood. No,
I don't think it is. I think the initial week, like I mentioned, people are going to be trying to figure out the healthy balance between managing their gauge in between berserks. I think that's where most warriors are going to have the most trouble because I think people are going to be over. I think initially people are going to be overspending their gauge leading up to their second berserk, and then you're just going to be left like you're either going to be sitting there pooling a berserk while you rebuild 100, or you're going to be doing a shitty berserk that doesn't have 3 Fel Cleaves. So I think that's where the difficulty is going to lie. But I don't think that that's going to be so difficult that it's going to be a long-lasting thing. I think once people figure, I do think that Warrior is a tank that is actually going to be one of the few tanks that has a static rotation. Paladin, I guess, would also be the one with static rotation. But I think both Warrior and Paladin are going to be pretty static in their rotations.
As well as that static.
Yes, I mean, maybe.
No. Well, I mean, the interesting thing about Paladin is that you're using your points to just defend, and sometimes you don't need to defend, right? And so that's
you're talking about with Paladin.
Yeah, with Paladin. And with Warrior, it's like you're using your points to do offensive and do higher damage, so they're supporting that fact. But when you're going back to Paladin, they're supporting, hey, use your extra points to reduce damage overall. And it's kind of scary to think about that because I feel like Paladins might be backed into the same situation to where they're going to be doing a lot less damage. If you're using all of your points to do more Fel Cleaves and burst out all this, how are you going to really...
I mean, at the end of the day, like that has nothing to do with gameplay, and that has everything to do with the number they put on the potencies.
Well, yeah, so it does.
The rotation is independent to the output that a class should be dealing. It's entirely what they do with the potency values on these tooltips that will determine that.
But I mean, if they're doing the same damage, then Paladins technically have a one-up by just reducing more damage overall. I mean, so they have to do a little bit less,
maybe
right?
Not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Because, I mean, one thing that I do feel about Warrior, that I've sort of been touting its offensive capabilities right now. One thing I do want to say about Warrior is Warrior has definitely been gutted a little bit in terms of its party utility. Like we highlighted really early on in the show, that Storm's Path is no longer a warrior-only ability. It's now a cross-roll ability in the form of reprisal. What else does a warrior bring to the raid? Well, they really just bring damage and mitigation. They don't really bring any like party utility or party-wide mitigation. However, in my opinion, after messing around with it, I feel that they are some of the best in the business at self-mitigation. I think the addition of Rampart into their already established and well balanced kit, or not, well, I shouldn't say well balanced, very strong kit. Adding Rampart to that kit, I mean, they're going to be extremely powerful in terms of self mitigation. So you're then weighing a class that doesn't bring much utility but brings incredible self mitigation versus a class that brings a ton of utility in Paladin. So that's going to be, I think, where the conversation heads. And then beyond that conversation, you're then looking at differences in DPS.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's impossible to tell right now, I think.
Exactly. Sure. I think the biggest question mark and the unfortunate thing that we won't have answer to until Stormblood actually launches is the question mark of the DPS disparity between the three. And that will be something we'll just have to test with.
When we're talking about rotation too, the Paladin is going to be like super set in stone, right? I mean, your gauge doesn't affect your rotation, does it?
Yes, it seems that way. Yeah. So the gauge is strictly a utility and defensive kit.
And so, but with warriors, it's definitely going to affect their rotation 100%.
Yes.
And how to use it.
I do think that the warrior rotation will end up being very static, however.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be down to the GCD. Like you use your upheaval here. That leaves you with 80 gauge at this point, and then I think it's going to be very stable. I think the only thing where players are going to be flexible with their rotation is the use of onslaught, which is the charge. Cleverly using onslaught to maneuver a fight, maybe for better uptime. You will have to on the fly tweak your rotation to make sure that it doesn't negatively affect your felt leaves, and that will be definitely a skill cap that experienced warriors are going to be like having a field day with.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, back to your original point of as a paladin, maybe it feels bad man a little bit because warriors have this like cool offensive capability, and my paladin just has a gauge that doesn't really benefit my offense.
Yeah, I mean, I can just see paladins right now ignoring their gauge and only sitting at 100 because they don't feel the use out of it. But because I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you don't care to mitigate.
Right.
But when you're in like
yes.
when you're in like a dungeon, you're not going to care about those as much, right? Those mitigations are going to be kind of
presumably, yeah, like a 4-man or something.
Yeah, and so it seems a little odd. I feel like it is kind of lackluster for Paladin in that way. But that's just my thoughts right now.
I say give the Paladin a shot. I think that oh yeah, well I can tell you that I definitely left the event feeling Paladin was much more fun in Stormblood than Heavensward.
Well, they were much more fun in Heavensward than they were in War 2. Oh, those are dark days.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not going to be 1, 2, 3. Put it that way.
Yeah. Good.
Mess around with Requiescat and before you
require
draw final
cat.
judgment.
All right. Do you feel good with Warrior yet? You feel like
I think I probably touched on most of the stuff I'd want to talk about with Warrior. Okay. I think it's important to highlight that the dynamic of the Butcher's Block combo being their main source of damage, but also their source of threat. Surprisingly, that was unchanged. I actually expected them to go to the Halone route and sort of nerf the potency of Butcher's Block and put that extra potency on Storm's Eye or something. But surprisingly, that's still the case. We still have a tank that its main damaging 1, 2, 3 is also its highest threat. So that will, of course, lead to some annoyances. However,
well, I mean, it could be just Warrior main tanks. You never know, man.
Well, they have so much self-mitigation that, I mean, I think a lot of times we will be seeing Warriors utilized in a tanking scenario.
I think in this situation with a Paladin Warrior, I mean, it'd be really awesome to see Warrior as the main tank here because Paladin could support him.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess
really, at the end of the day, like what decides the main tank is always content dependent, though.
Yeah,
it's always content dependent. And it's always rotation dependent.
Well, I mean, main tank is a really stupid word in the end.
Exactly. That's
but
what
I mean, like,
say.
Yeah, but if you're going to have like a lot of key focus going on a Warrior, you can have them pretty much solo tank a lot of it, I guess, if you have Paladin backing them up. And then a lot of the cooldowns, with that one cooldown, you can have a Paladin pretty much support him to keep taking attacks. But then again, you would probably want to swap with him to get the bigger cooldowns out of the way with the Paladin as well.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I am not going to be the guy that calls something a main tank or an off tank. There is tank A who currently has aggro and tank B who currently does not have aggro.
Yes.
Because the majority of progression fights involve utilizing both tanks' cooldowns to their utmost efficiency.
So you can get the most damage out for sure. And I mean, like Warrior is going that will make those switches a lot more difficult with Warrior than you're right with Butcher's Block and everything else. And so Paladin is probably going to have to hold him a little bit less.
The optimal warrior rotations may involve a lot more Storm's Path than Butcher's Blocks, just because again, it's that time period in between berserks that you're really seeing the biggest I think question mark right now, and optimizing that time period. I'm not sure how many Butcher's Blocks you can feasibly fit inside there yet.
Okay.
The one thing that we should say about Warrior before we move on from it is they did get a nerf in terms of flexibility. Every time you swap a stance, you lose half of your beast gauge,
which is similar to Paladin. Yeah,
it's very similar to Paladin. However, it is extremely cumbersome to deal with. I ran the Warrior through a dungeon We were able to run through a dungeon at the event, and I took warrior through a dungeon and found myself not struggling to manage the fact that I was losing half my gauge every time I swapped, but more so finding it as a very large inconvenience to what I was used to. I'm somebody who's very used to being able to on the fly swap between Defiance and Deliverance with very little punishment. You're going to get some whiplash.
That's actually very true, because now that I think
Yes.
about it, warriors easily went back and forth, and that was one of the big.
Very common in dungeons that a warrior was constantly going back and forth between the two. Like, you need your Defiance for your initial threat, your drive-by flash threat, and then as soon as the pull starts, you're back in Deliverance.
Yeah. I mean, Paladins are heavily punished for that.
Yes.
So
they are. However, I think just in terms of the way the warrior kit works out, I found it to be a bit more annoying on warrior than I did on paladin, because like we talked about, the entirety of the warrior's offensive strength relies on that gauge. So when you're depleting that gauge, you are directly hurting my offensive capabilities. Whereas with the paladin, that's not necessarily true. So
right.
you're only affecting their initial defense, and in something like a dungeon, that's not necessarily a very big deal. But in a dungeon run where like I'm now having to swap between Defiance and Deliverance and now hurting my potential number of decimates, I found it to be cumbersome. But it'll be an adjustment period, and people will just have to get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, they should be happy they got 6 fell cleaves, so.
Yes. I was.
And an uppercut.
And uppercut. It's a pretty cool animation too. It's literally an uppercut.
That's all right. I'll feel cool about being a paladin, I'm sure. Day one.
Hey man, just level the warrior alt, dude. Just level the warrior alt.
Dude, I'm down with warrior. It's for
Okay.
it's for hipsters.
All right, I'll be the hipster. I'm fine with that. The real hipsters are what's coming up next, though.
Okay, let's get into the hipsters of the Dark Knights.
I feel like we touched on Paladin and Warrior a good amount. Dark Knight. How should I open the Dark Knight discussion? I see in chat right now something that I do want to answer before we go on.
Sure.
Warrior is actually the only tank that still applies slashing debuff. Maim does apply slashing, and Paladins and Dark Knights do not have anything that applies slashing, to my knowledge, unless I'm completely blind. I didn't see anything like that, so I thought that was actually surprising to me.
But I mean, there's other sources for it, so it's not like a huge.
There are. We have now Shadowfang from Ninjas applies slashing, and Samurai applies slashing as well. So yeah, there's many other places to get it than the Warrior tank. Yeah. But let's talk about Dark Knight a little bit. Okay. Dark Knight, I personally felt from first glances that Dark Knight was going to be my favorite tank, and this kind of surprised me. Okay. I think it's the tank that I have least solved so far. However, as I've been like musing over it, leading up to this show today, I've sort of come up with some new ideas for how I would approach the class, and they're very different from how I initially was approaching it at the event. So I'll try to do my best here to accurately describe how maybe we should be looking at the class right now. So the Dark Knight did undergo some big changes. One of the big things, and forget my clicking and won't be clicking while I'm talking, so I'm trying to get the Dark Knight abilities. One of the big things about Dark Knight that really jumped out off the picture at you is the fact that Delirium no longer is a comboed ability anymore. If you're familiar with Delirium, from Heavensward, Delirium was a weapon skill that comboed off of your Siphon Strike that applied the intellect debuff. It was your highest potency ability that was not Dark Arts. So if you couldn't Dark Arts, you would Delirium, and if you could Dark Arts, you would Soul Eater. And Delirium had the added benefit of also applying an intellect debuff. Delirium is no longer a weapon skill. It's actually an OGCD, and its usage is one of the coolest things I think about the class. I'll get into that a little bit later. I need to talk about some other stuff first.
Okay.
So with Dark Knight, we have a gauge called Blood Gauge, and the ways you build the Blood Gauge are different from both the Warrior and the Paladin.
off the top of my head, there are multiple ways to build the gauge. And off the top of my head, some of the main ones are, there's 3 main ones and then there's one big one. Any, I want to make sure it's not just auto attacks. Where's the tooltip? Blah, 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 blah. Also increases blood gauge by 3 each time an auto attack or weapon. Okay, perfect. I didn't want to say auto attacks and be wrong. So blood weapon, anytime you pop blood weapon, it still returns MP when you deal damage. However, also now, anytime you deal damage, it also increases your blood gauge by 3. And 3 is a value that is subject to change before release. Don't take 3 as scripture right now, guys. This is all. This is a tooltip that is not a part of the final build. So don't be surprised if any of these numbers change. We're just gonna, for purposes of preview, I'm just gonna talk as the tooltips show me. But don't be surprised if they do change. For this tooltip, blood weapon, every time you damage, it does return the MP, but it also increases your blood gauge by 3. Blood weapon has a 15-second duration and a 40-second recast, and it still cannot be used while under grit. So you still have to be out of grit to blood weapon, and it's definitely a good way to build your blood gauge. Each time you auto attack and each time you use an ability, coupled with the fact that blood weapon increases your haste, that blood gauge is going to fill pretty damn fast with blood weapon. The other way to build blood gauge is blood price. And blood price still has its effect where it returns MP when you take damage. However, it now has the additional effect of every time you take damage, increases your blood gauge by 5. So, you can see how blood weapon and blood price are building up your gauge right now. However, there is a very big nerf to blood price here that we should highlight. Blood price is now only usable while under grit, whereas before it was usable both outside and under grit. And now it is only usable under grit. So that is a big change for Darknet. Any Darknet players will know that's a very big change.
I played it for 1 or 2 A12Ss.
Okay, well then you may or may not know that's a big change.
Yes.
So you have blood weapon and blood price building your gauge, and then you also have you actually have 3 other ways to build. There's actually 5 total ways, I believe, off the top of my head. So the third way you build your gauge is by doing a Dark Arts Soul Eater, and I'm going to make sure that it's only the Dark Arts one.
I'm trying to get the blood gauge on the screen right now just so people can see it for fun.
Dark Arts, combo potency, combo bonus. Okay, so I believe that it's only the Dark Arts Soul Eater that increases the blood gauge by 10, but I'm not going to say 100% on that. The way that I read the tooltip right now, it appears that the combo bonus is applied to the Dark Arts combo. So we'll say the Dark Arts Soul Eater applies it by 10, and we'll go with that. But if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. So those are 3 different ways to build your gauge. A 4th way to build your gauge is Salted Earth. Each time Salted Earth ticks, and each time Salted Earth ticks, you build 1 blood gauge. And as I recall off the top of my head, that counts for multiple enemies. So if you place a Salted Earth down on an AoE pack, you're building a ton of gauge from that pack from Salted Earth. So that's really important. All these things, like Dark Knight can build up this gauge pretty damn fast. Then there's also a 5th way to build the gauge. And I think some people in chat are saying that the Dark Arts is not required for the Soul Eater gauge building. Entirely possible. And when you're in, you probably will be Dark Artsing most of your Soul Eaters anyway, but good to know if that's true. The 5th way to build the blood gauge is one of the Dark Knight's new abilities, and this is a perfect way to segue into their new ability. Let me pull up the tooltip for accuracy. Okay, so one of their new abilities is called the Blackest Night. It is this Dark Knight has about 9,500 MP at max level, and this ability costs 2,400 MP. And it only has a 15-second recast. Now, when I see this ability, I notice on the Dark Knight's action bars that Shadow Skin is no longer there, and that to me is a product of the fact that they've given Rampart as a cross-roll ability, and Rampart is now the Dark Knight's Shadow Skin, because Shadow Skin and Rampart behaved the same before, so it was just kind of like ability bloat. So that's fine. But Blackest Night is a new ability that they've given them. And it reads as follows: creates a barrier around yourself that absorbs damage totaling 20% of your maximum HP. Or creates a barrier around a party member that absorbs damage totaling 10% of your maximum HP. So if you use it on yourself, it creates a health buffer of 20% of your HP. If you use it on a party member, it creates a health buffer of 10% of your HP. And it only has a 15-second recast. So really your big limiter here is MP. It does cost a hefty amount of MP. 2,400 is nothing to shake a stick at.
Right.
I don't know if I use that phrase accurately, but
no, that's
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think I meant the opposite, but whatever. You should. I think you do shake a stick at it because it costs so much MP. But
well, I
yeah,
mean, it gives you 50 blood gauge as well.
Exactly. So that's what I'm going to get to. This is the fifth way to build your gauge. When the effect expires, so that would be when the shield is broken and or the shield fades due to timeout, increases blood gauge by 50. 50. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a big number.
Yeah.
And we talked about all these cool ways to build gauge, and oh my god, Dark Knight can build gauge so fast. Well, Layla, what the hell does this matter? What can you even do with this gauge?
Mm-hmm.
What you can do with this gauge is really cool. And it's gonna sound kind of bland, but when you're actually playing the class and using this stuff in your rotation, it's really fun. Off the top of my head, they have 2 gauge spenders. They have a single target one and they have an AoE one. The single target ability is called Blood Spiller, and the AoE one is called Quietus. And these are high hitting, like really high potency hitting attacks. And at the rate at which Dark Knights can build this gauge, you can use these abilities pretty frequently, I was finding. Especially with things like Blood Weapon going. And on large AoE packs, when you have Salted Earth going, using the high potency Quietus spender, it's going to feel really satisfying. Let me pull up these tooltips for you guys so you can actually like understand the types of potencies we're dealing with here. Let's find it. All right, here we go. Here's Blood Spiller. All right, let's start with Quietus actually.
Okay.
Quietus has a weapon skill that costs 50 of your blood gauge. It has a Dark Arts AoE potency of 210. It is a tank AoE ability that has a potency of 210. I mean, we're not really approaching the realm of 6 decimates in a row, but compared to what Dark Knights currently have, that's a lot of damage. So that's a very welcome addition to the Dark Knight AoE rotation, and I had a lot of fun using it. The single target one is called Blood Spiller, and Blood Spiller is again a 50 gauge dump. I'm gonna read this tooltip from top to bottom so you guys can experience the climb with me. So just raw with no Dark Arts, delivers an attack with a potency of 380. Okay, that's pretty high potency. When you Dark Arts it, delivers an attack with a potency of 520. Okay, so we're getting pretty high. Again, this costs 50 gauge. It's not really spammable, but you can get gauge pretty easily. Here's the interesting part about the ability. And this will definitely be interesting. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that they went this route, which we'll talk about in a minute. But under Grit, it actually has a higher potency than outside of Grit, which is weird to me. So the Grit potency is 475. The Dark Arts Grit potency is 650. Now, I understand that this is like they want to make the ability part of the rotation, your DPS rotation while you're in Grit. And I understand that they wanted to counteract the fact that Grit reduces your damage. Why take this route and not just have the tooltip read ignores Grit damage penalty, just like they do with some of the Defiance things?
Right. That makes more sense.
I thought that was a weird design decision because it's kind of, I don't know. If I were to pick one thing that I would expect to change before Stormblood release, I actually think that this would be something that I would expect maybe change. I don't have any information on whether or not it's going to. However, it just seems a lot more intuitive for both a player and a developer to, if they want this to be a part of the Grit rotation, just have it ignore the Grit damage penalty. rather than having this buffed grit potency. So I don't know. Either way, the ability is fucking strong. Pardon my French, but it does a lot of damage. And with the rate at which Dark Knights can build their gauge during their cooldowns and stuff, we're gonna have Blood Spillers popping off like crazy. So I had a lot of fun with Dark Knight openers at the target dummy, and I haven't even gotten into the rest of the toolkit of the Dark Knight. We've only just talked about the blood gauge spenders, but overall the class is really fun to play. So let's talk about some of the other things that are different. I highlighted a little bit earlier that the Delirium saw a big change, and we've talked about what Blood Weapon and Blood Price have done or have become, and you can sort of like see in your head like a Dark Knight's damage is going to come from getting the most out of your blood gauge as you can, and like building as much blood gauge as you can, and getting as many blood spillers as you can. That really feels like where a Dark Knight's damage is going to come from, because every global you're spending your blood spiller on is a global you're not is a global you're not spending doing other stuff. So, while you're still dark artsing a blood spiller, it really just feels like getting the most blood spillers as you can is what a Dark Knight's goal is going to be. And one of the ways you get the most out of your blood spiller and your blood gauge, your blood spiller usage and your blood gauge, is your delirium usage. What delirium does is really cool now, and I really like what they did with it. Let me pull up the exact tooltip for you. Where is it? 1 second. I think it's somewhere. Here it is. Okay. So Delirium, I said earlier, is not a weapon skill. It's an OGCD with a 2-minute recast. It fully restores your MP when you use it. So think like super carbon spit. And why is that important? Well, that's important because when you're pumping blood spillers out, you're going to be burning through MP pretty quickly because you're going to be dark artsing all of them. If you really want to avoid a non-dark arts blood spiller, in my experience, I think that if you're put in that situation, you've probably done something wrong.
Will you get the most effect out of dark artsing the blood spiller over other
and you don't want your gauge. Yes, you definitely do, and you don't want your gauge to be overcapping. So you want to be put in a situation where you can always be dark. You can always have MP to dark arts before your gauge overcaps. That's going to be really important. And proper blood weapon and blood price usage and delirium usage is how you're going to accomplish that. Because what delirium does now is not only does it instantly restore your MP, but if you have blood weapon active, it extends the duration of your blood weapon by 8 seconds. And if you have blood price active, it extends the duration of your blood price by 16 seconds. So this is how you're going to be able to maximize your MP generation during these 2-minute like big CD windows, and getting the most amount of dark arts blood spillers as you can. A blood weapon that has an 8-second added duration to it, that is so much blood gauge you're building. That is so much MP you're building. It's just crazy. The output that you have during a delirium window is insane. I haven't specifically, like I've said earlier many times, I haven't mathed how it actually compares to a warrior's Hexa Fellcleave Berserk 2-minute rotation. But the Dark Knight is definitely looking really strong on a 2-minute basis. These delirium windows are really strong.
Right.
And I thought it was a really fun playstyle. Blood Spiller has an awesome animation. I don't know if it's viewable in the trailer. It probably is. But it has a really satisfying animation that just feels like you do an ass ton of damage when it lands. I just thought it was a lot of fun.
Almost as satisfying as Paladins.
Unfortunately, it seems like every cool ability that I talk about for offensive purposes happens to not be on the class that you're most interested in.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, I still get the things that I want from it, but like it's just I was hoping.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see, and I know I've said this multiple times, and I just can't stress it enough. I have not mathed the actual rotations between when it comes to Warrior and Dark Knight, so I can't say which ones. I can't say where which DPS realm each is going to land. But I'm really excited to see how Dark Knight is going to how Dark Knight is going to stack up against something like the Warrior.
Right.
because I see a lot of potential for an ass ton of blood spillers.
Yeah. I mean, like that seems to be the common theme,
Uh-huh.
right? Is to have one ability that you're always shooting for, so you can just
Yes.
spam that ability as much as possible.
Yeah, I guess that was their intent when they were designing Holy Spirit with the Paladin. I just think that the management required for Holy Spirit is much less so, is much less intensive than the management of something like a Blood Gauge or a Dark Knight's MP. I can tell you that I left the event feeling not much different than I did in Heaven's Ward, where Dark Knight was clearly much more difficult to play than the other two tanks.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's just because my lack of familiarity with it compared to my familiarity with Warrior. I do consider myself decently knowledgeable about Dark Knight, not somebody to the level of like Vox or Rafter or Yoda, but I do feel that I have a pretty strong grasp on the class, and I still felt that it was more difficult than both Warrior and Paladin to play.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's the thing. That's kind of a trademark of Dark Knight as well that I felt. It's like playing it. Paladin is going to be kind of an easier job to play, but Dark Knight's more mechanically difficult to play, but it does reward you a lot better. And that's how I felt like in Heaven's Ward, and it makes sense.
Potentially, and that it may be a scenario where that dynamic hasn't changed. I know that their goal is to change that, but it may. I mean, maybe they don't hit the mark entirely, and it's still a work in progress. However, I do think I have to say that I felt that Paladin is in a much better spot in Stormblood than it was in Heaven's Ward. So you do have that to look forward to, and any Paladin player listening right now, they can rest assured that your class is in much better hands than it is currently.
Right. And again, it was in much better hands going from A Realm Reborn going to Heaven's Ward. So we're taking baby steps, it feels like, each expansion.
I personally like Paladin a lot. I've actually been toying around with the idea of like where I'm going to be finding Paladin, viable and applicable in 4.0 already. So,
well, I mean,
I would expect.
We have to see the fights.
I would not be surprised. Yeah, A, we have to see the fights, and B, we have to see the potencies and stuff. But I will not be surprised if Paladin is a very, very, very viable and potentially maybe even optimal option on some fights.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting seeing how it all turns out, because it seems like Dark Knight and Warrior are both going kind of like a DPS side, and Dark Knight, of course, has that extra little sort of relatable ability where it says, hey, I can protect somebody and do a little bit less damage to this one person over here.
While also buffing their own offensive capabilities.
Yeah.
Because it gives them the 50 gauge.
So it kind of puts Paladin into a very strong defensive role, but I feel like we might get into the same kind of hole if it turns into a situation.
It's possible, but let me just tell you something. It's a brand new expansion. We're gonna have brand new mechanics. We're gonna have brand new raids. We don't know how these raids are gonna be designed yet. It is entirely possible that stuff like a Paladin's level of utility is highly desired. You have to also remember that tanks are probably going to be dealing less damage than they are right now. We haven't even gotten into that yet. We haven't even gotten into the fact that there's a potential that with the new way that they're itemizing tanks may just potentially be dealing, I mean, not even potentially, they probably most definitely will be dealing less damage percentage-wise than they are right now.
And they should. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's something that should be the case.
So let me run this by you. In a scenario where your tank is dealing the overall less percentage of a raid boss's HP, that alone is increasing the potential viability for a more defensive tank than an offensive tank. If a kit like the Paladins allows a much more aggressive playstyle of the real DPS players of your team, and they're able to get a much larger return because they're actual DPS classes, and that larger return outweighs what a high DPS variant like a 6 Spellcleave Warrior brings to the team, then a Paladin kit is completely fine. And the defensive kit that a Paladin brings is completely fine and optimal in that regard. We really just need to see how the damage is going to shape up at level 70. And I've seen a little bit of it firsthand, obviously, but the numbers that I saw are obviously not finalized, so I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to use that as specific reference yet.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's true as well. But I mean, when we're looking at healers, I don't know how good of a look you got with healers. If you got a look at them, does it look like maybe we could also be doing a shift where healers are not doing as much damage.
I think it's definitely too early for me to say that. I think the cleric thing, there's obviously the big cleric change difference for me with now. Cleric is now a DPS cooldown and not a stance. It's a DPS cooldown that in its current form increases your damage by 5%. I think in a pot window, that's really cool and all, but overall that's probably going to net less overall damage contribution. Too early for me to say, and I also didn't experiment enough with that to give an accurate opinion. I would say that my gut feeling right now going into Stormblood is that the majority of a raid's damage is going to be coming from its 4 DPS classes. That's my gut feeling. I think that's how it's shaping up. It could get turned completely on its side, but that's how I am envisioning things playing out.
Well, I mean, if that plays out that way where healers are doing less damage, then your defensive capabilities don't net as much either, right? Because you're not. I mean, you're stopping the fact that you're taking damage and giving your healers a higher chance to do more damage, but if they're not doing as much damage, right? So
yeah, I mean that's a completely fair point, and it's all about finding that balance, LOL, and finding the balance that works best for your raid's overall raid DPS, and that's something that takes practice, and that's something that takes trial and error. I can speak from experience. It definitely takes trial and error to figure out and find that balance. And if you're some of my astrologians, you'll never find the balance.
Oh God. Oh, hopefully that'll be a lot better. We'll see. Okay, so do you feel pretty good and confident about what we said about Dark Knights, or do you feel like we need to dive in?
Yeah. Let me just make sure that I think the main thing that I wanted to get across is just the consensus that a Dark Knight's going to be wanting to maximize its Blood Spiller and Quietus usage as best they can, and a lot of that playstyle is going to be determined by how well you manage your MP, and how well you build your blood gauge. So I think let's see. Yeah, I think we've sort of touched on everything needed there. Seeing if there was anything last minute. No, I think we hit everything.
Okay. Well, with that all being said, having, I guess, your opinion on the compositions with different tanks playing with each other, for example, Paladin, Dark Knight.
Sure.
I mean, if we're going to just kind of have an idea of a preview of what it might look like, does it look like that these jobs are going to be more balanced in the way that you don't always, have to, I mean, it looks like it's not going to always need a warrior anymore, but do you feel like with all these changes overall, it's pretty obvious now that you could take a Dark Knight Paladin and not completely destroy your raid?
I think you can take a Dark Knight Paladin and not destroy your raid. 100%. The big ability that was stopping that was Storm's Path.
Right.
There will always be the one combination that is more optimal and nets higher raid DPS than the others. That there will always be. However, it is much less punishing, I think, in Stormblood to experiment with the tanks than it was in Heaven's Ward. In Heaven's Ward, it was very, very polarizing. You brought this to a fight, or you brought that to a fight, and outside of I want to say Midas. Is Midas a good example? Let's think. Outside of Midas, it's really not been very flexible. Creator was obviously the king of flexibility. But I remember on Midas, we actually favored Paladin on a fight like A7.
Right.
But that wasn't really because of damage. That was because of utility. So again, it's always going to be this conversation of what do you want for a fight? And in my opinion, that's how it should be. One of the things that I've been preaching for years now is the fact that this is an MMO, and this is an MMO that has one thing over other MMOs, and that's the fact that you can change your class at any time you want on your same character, which means that you should take advantage of that. You should take advantage of the armory system in this game and be flexible with what you want to play and play whatever is good on a fight. I've been preaching that for years now, and I really do feel that it's the best way to play this game. There's always going to be the one composition that nets you the highest raid DPS, but does that necessarily mean that that composition is going to get you the fastest kill? Not always. In Creator, it typically did, but in raids prior to that, that wasn't necessarily true. We debatably took a less DPS favored comp through Midas and saw a lot of success with it because it had a much smaller learning curve, because the defensive capabilities of it were so much more obvious that you just get through phases quicker because it's much more easier to manage things. Now that's one of the strengths of a composition like that. And when you're going through progression, like that's definitely something you want to consider, is how even if this comp is really strong, what's the learning curve of this comp on this fight? So I just encourage people to take advantage of the armory system in this game and always be ready to experiment with different jobs on different fights. And I think that Stormblood has given us a healthy set of tools to do that so far.
Yeah.
At least for the tanks.
And I'm glad they did this. I'm very happy they didn't release a tank if it results to something where we have a balanced setup between all the tanks.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to DPS classes and healers, they're probably not in as great a shape as the 3 tanks are in that regard. However, I think that the fact that they made stuff like Addle, which is the new intellect debuff, they've made that a cross-roll ability, and Feint, which is the new strength and dexterity debuff, they've made that a cross-roll ability. I think the fact that those are cross-roll abilities, people are going to be able to be a lot more flexible and experiment with jobs a lot more so than it did in Heaven's Word. I think it's just safe to say, and I don't think you'll find much disagreement from people I've talked to, that there's much more capability for flexibility in Stormblood than there was in Heaven's Word.
Yeah. The interesting thing that people are saying is that with a samurai, it kind of helps you alleviate the need for a warrior.
Sure. With the slashing debuff, yeah.
When you
say the same thing for ninja, though.
Yeah, you could. When you're talking about like using a DPS loss, are you having a DPS loss with samurai versus having a DPS loss with ninja?
Yes. So they actually addressed that though. They moved. I think they actually deleted Dancing Edge entirely. Because it's just as you say. Ninjas before, they didn't want a Dancing Edge. They wanted to be using that global on Aeolian Edge, which was a higher potency. But now they've amended that by just deleting Dancing Edge, I'm pretty sure, and they've now applied the slashing debuff to Shadowfang, which, to my knowledge, means 100% uptime for Ninja.
Okay, so that's amazing. Which means that if people are going to go and play Samurai, and people are having this whole little fit about, I want to be a samurai, and tip their fedora and everything else, of course, right? Yeah, then that means that warrior might be in the background.
It's possible, but it also doesn't exclude it doesn't mean you can't take a warrior to a party that already has slashing.
It's true.
Warrior is still strong. It's a very in terms of self-mitigation, warriors may be unrivaled. I don't know. Paladin's still really strong, but warriors their self-mitigation in Stormblood is pretty crazy. They didn't really nerf anything other than getting rid of Foresight, and they just gave them Rampart. So. And they still have Inner Beast for the heavy hitters when you need to. So yeah, I think the game is fine in that sense. Like it's not so polarizing where like, oh, I have this class, that means I can't take this class now.
Okay.
It doesn't really feel that way. I think that the only time where you start drawing that line is when you start like stacking the same classes, multi-stacking classes. Because then you start getting into the territory of nerfing your LB generation,
right?
And that's that's a raid DPS loss. So,
that's why it exists, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the other part to it is we talked a lot about the changes with tanks and kind of what's coming in with Paladins, Warriors, and Dark Knights. If you just had to put your opinion on what's going to be the most dramatic change for these jobs, which job gets the most dramatic change out of everyone?
Of the 3 that I've talked about? The most dramatic change, definitely not Warrior. I felt that Warrior actually played very similarly to how it does right now. It's just that small window of time where I talked about how you need to learn to manage your gauge in between berserks. It's the only learning curve really in my eyes. The most dramatic change, it's definitely got to be Dark Knight. It has to be. I think that the additional management of a gauge, in addition to managing your MP, made the class. They somehow managed to make Dark Knight more difficult than it already was. So yeah, it's definitely gonna be Dark Knight. Paladin, a close runner-up for certain, because the Paladin's defensive kit is going to change how they approach a fight defensively. But their offensive rotation, I don't think, is such a large enough learning curve to warrant being like a massive change. You have your Requiescat window and you have your fight or flight window, and that's really it in terms of offensive changes.
Okay. So, I mean, I even with the uppercut happening, I'm still excited for Paladin. I'm still very excited.
I think you should be. I told you, man, I left the event feeling Paladin was in a great spot. I liked Paladin.
I want to see.
If I was doing World Prog right now, man, and I was like really tight-lipped about stuff, I would be having conversations about my team, like, okay, let's be on the lookout for Paladin.
Let's be figuring out if we need to be getting in there and doing.
Yeah, it looks really strong.
Bubble at people. It looks very interesting. I feel like the bubble thing was just a weird choice, but that's just a.
You're talking about the Holy Spirit?
Yeah, the Holy Spirit. It's just
try it out. Try it out before you make a judgment. Try Requiescat out.
All right.
I'll try it out. Saying that right.
Okay, so I mean, with tanks overall right now, it looks like they're going into a really good spot. I'm pretty excited to see the differences between all of them. And I hope that Paladin fills this nice little void in my heart where I'm using utility and PvE, because that's what I'm looking for.
Personally.
But I mean, that's really going to come with the fights, and we're not going to know anything about the fights until we actually do them. I don't think they actually released that information, at least not a lot of that information, before we actually see the fights themselves, right?
Which information? I'm sorry.
The fight information, the actual
the actual content, raid encounters and stuff. No, we won't see that until normal mode.
Yeah, and so it's going to be exciting to see that, but that's the only last cautious factor I think that's involved with all of it.
Well, at the end of the day, Frosty, you're just like the other people I encourage. I encourage you to use the armory system and experiment with all 3 tanks, man.
I got them all leveled up. I don't care.
I really discourage people from this mentality of, this is my main, I only play this. Like, if you want to be that way, that's fine. I just think
you know what my logo is, Mr. Layla.
I mean, I understand it's a Paladin logo. I understand, but I encourage you to use the system that Square Enix has given you in the very flexible armory system.
Yeah, I have a lot of things leveled up. I have all my tanks leveled up, of course.
Much more interesting of a game when you're playing multiple jobs rather than just focusing on one, in my experience.
It is. I feel like it's at the beginning. Now, I forgot how they said they were going to do gear. Basically, the gear you get at level 70, they just give it to you, right?
I think that it's going to behave similarly to Realm Reborn, where we went through the job quests and we got job AF gear from doing those quests. I think it'll probably be similar to that, where we do some level 70 job quest and we get gear, but I could be wrong.
So we're not going to hit that wall where hey, we have to pick a job and gear that job like we did in Heaven's Word.
I mean, we probably will when tomes start coming out. I mean, that is also the unfortunate thing I think about the tome system, and I didn't actually.
It will go towards a role. It won't go towards a particular job, right?
Has that been? I actually don't know. Has that been confirmed that they're doing the role tome gear instead of
I would think so, because I think the discussion was, hey, that all these different jobs are going to get their gear, their AF gear will happen as soon as they hit 70.
Okay, so you're saying it would make sense to have an extra set of AF gear beyond that.
Yeah, I don't think that they will do another one. But
yeah, sure, that's a fair assumption.
We'll see for sure.
Then I guess the first fork in the road becomes the weapon week when you're deciding on a weapon.
You're right.
Yeah. So at that point, you do have to make a decision, and I always felt that was kind of unfortunate because it really does pigeonhole you. And I wish that I've said this before on multiple streams. I used to harp on it a lot more back in the day. I really wish tome weapons didn't exist. I understand that they're there for players to get to catch up and get through the content, but I feel like they really make progression less interesting.
Well, I don't know if it's less interesting. It makes it
Okay, so I think that they make world progression less interesting. I'll put it that way.
Okay, world progression, yes.
Yes, as soon as weapon weeks happen, your composition is pretty much locked, and you can't experiment with anything anymore. And that's not very fun. I remember we like when we were doing Brute Justice Prog, and we had to decide the lock in of the monk comp, and I like the monk, but if we ever wanted to experiment with something that wasn't a monk, doesn't matter. We can't at that point. We've already locked in our weapon. So I've never been a fan of tone weapons personally.
I'm from a different point of view on it, and
yes,
I
of course.
feel like
I do sympathize and empathize with the fact that it is a very important tool for players being able to catch up and get through content.
Yeah.
I just hate it.
I know. Okay, so we talked a lot about Stormblood tanking, and we talked a lot about the Q&A you had with Yoshida, and kind of going to the event. What's some stuff that like is still lingering with you? Is there anything that's just kind of like lingering with you that you're like, man, I need to get this out?
I'm pretty sated right now, man. I mean, we hit all the talking points I wanted to hit on, and I'm finally able to talk about the tanks, which has been killing me.
Yeah.
Again, I've said it multiple times in your show, but if anybody's like just skipping through the VOD and they didn't catch it when I said it before, everything that we've talked about is subject to change. All this content is just for preview. None of this build that we're reviewing right now is finalized. It's honestly the tooltips you're seeing right now are from like a 1+ month old build. So stuff could be entirely different right now.
Yeah.
But I like where the tanks are at. I think I've made that pretty clear with how passionate I am about them. I really am curious to see where they line up in terms of DPS disparities. I expect that, Paladin will probably be a little bit lower, but I want to see how much. Because if it's not a lot, then it becomes a very interesting tank to play. I hope that it ends up not being a lot.
Yeah, I'm nervous and hopeful. To be honest with you,
that's a fair place to be, I guess, for Paladin.
I mean,
players.
in the end, like
nervous but hopeful.
Yeah, nervous and hopeful because I mean, this play style that they decided to do with Paladin is exactly what I want to play the game with. I want to be a support job that tanks, and that's sounds maybe a little weird. But that's what
just
I
ignore
like.
the fact that there's 6 Velcleaves on your peripheral vision and just focus on your Holy Spirits.
Yeah, my Holy Spirits, and
they look great, man.
I'm sure they look wonderful, but they do not look like a single target attack from what I could see. It doesn't make sense to me.
The video displays it a little bit differently than than it looks actually in game. So it looks a little bit more like a single target nuke, but
okay, we'll see how it works out. I'm very hyped for it. I mean, my entire raid has been talking about it the entire time that they've been releasing this information, and they've been going through it, and we're all hyped for it. And I think Stormblood's going to be a huge, huge expansion, and I hope it's going to be the expansion that kind of brings the game more into life, and everyone's just going to be more happy. Because right now, that people get kind of bored pretty easily.
Well, at the end of the day, right now, I mean, Heaven's Word has been kind of stalled for a while. I feel personally. I think people are kind of Heaven's Worded out. Like this is new expansions are like new games. Everything's gonna be fresh. We're all gonna be just as dumb as everyone else, and we're gonna be figuring stuff out at an even start, and it's just gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
this is my favorite part of MMO is a fresh expansion.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, like as long as the expansion holds up.
Of course.
For example, Warlord's Trainer was so wonderful when I was leveling up. And then
WoD was pretty awful after release, It
hit a wall really hard at in-game.
Let's hope it's not the Warlords of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, let's hope it's what the
Warlords promised so much change, and then it crushed all your dreams so quickly.
And I'm hoping that they do. I mean, it sounds like it. I mean, speaking with Yoshida with the interview I had before, speaking with him, it sounds like he's thinking on the right track at the moment with what he wants to do with everything.
So the conversations that I had with Yoshida at the event were all fantastic, and they really, really showed me that this is somebody who's really in tune with us as players. This is somebody who thinks he directs and produces as somebody with experience as a player, and that it was really noticeable in how he conducted himself in interviews and stuff. And I've kind of always known that about him, but it's really just awesome to kind of see it.
Yeah.
and he's clearly very intelligent in that regard.
Yeah, I would love to sit down with Yoshida and just spend like a dinner just talking about life in general.
Same, man.
Yeah.
Same.
It would be amazing because I feel like he would be a wonderfully interesting person to get to know a little bit better. Maybe one day. Maybe one day we can do that.
No.
But did you say no?
I said yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Well,
yeah, no, I don't want to do that.
No, never mind. Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like this is a good point to kind of wrap up the show. We had a couple questions come in,
Sure.
but I feel like we've answered a lot of them. But we can hit a couple of these real quick just to knock it out. So Furry Tractor here said, "How are the changes you've experienced playing out, for better or worse, on the specific jobs?" I guess that would be aimed kind of towards. Are the changes kind of playing out what you would hope they would play out for? And are there any that have been bad that you saw?
So 90% of them, yes. I was actually hoping that the things like slashing, piercing, and blunt damage vulnerability, I was hoping that those would be reduced down to sort of like OGCD abilities that had much shorter uptime, didn't have 100% uptime, similar to like trick attack windows, but for specific damage types. I was hoping for something like that, but I was kind of surprised to see that they remained in their Heavens Born form. But beyond that, I think everything else is what I would have expected and asked for.
Good. Okay. Straightest here. If you assume the meta changes to more outgoing raid-wide damage, what are your thoughts on the new Paladin mitigation, Passage of Arms? Would you try to cheese it, where you still tank the boss, but face him away, so it would get behind me? Could it be affecting your melee without moving from the back?
Oh, okay. That's good. Is there more? Sorry.
No, well, I said if it does only have an 8-yard difference distance.
Sure. So that'll be something we'll have to experiment with for sure. I feel like one thing that we haven't really talked about is one of the cross roll abilities for the melee DPS is an ability called something North. I can't remember, but it's basically an ability that removes sort of like that PvP ability that removes the positional requirements off of your abilities.
Mm-hmm.
That was a PvP ability a long time ago, wasn't it?
I don't remember that.
Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
Maybe
I don't
you
PvP
are.
enough in this game, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it's an ability that removes the PvP it moves the positional requirements off of abilities. True North. Yes, thank you, chat. And I feel like their creation of that ability was, and I could be completely wrong, but I feel like they were like raid testing Passage of Arms or something, which is the Get Behind Me Paladin ability. I feel like they were raid testing that, and their melee on their team were like, I can't do positionals back here. Like, oh, okay, we'll give you an ability that fixes that. So you do have the option for True North to ease the positional requirements. However, with an 8-yard range, theoretically, it is possible to position the boss so that the issue I have with this is the only way you'd be doing this is you wouldn't be facing the boss. You wouldn't be blocking the boss. He's basically talking about like making it so the boss is between the paladin and the party while the Passage of Arms is up. So that people can get their positionals off while also still getting the 50% damage reduction. The issue I have with that is as a paladin, in order to do that, you're not facing the boss at all. And that means you're not blocking the boss at all. And the ability has an 100% block rate while it's active. So I feel like you're missing a large portion of mitigation while you're doing that. So I don't actually know if there's much of a feature there. Unless there's some weird way to abuse it where you're like inside the mob's hitbox, so you're still able to block it, and also people are still able to be behind you and get positionals. I don't know.
I feel like it's going to be like better
really
for
weird,
like untargetable boss. Is when
I think so too. The way that I initially envision it, when I think about like Prague, because I play tanks in Prague, obviously, and I think about where I would use that and where that would be applicable in Prague, that's like an extra tank limit break. That's what I see it as.
I'm hoping so. I mean, I hope it becomes as valuable as a tank limit break. But
somebody in chat is saying, "Do you block 360 degrees now?" It's possible, actually. I didn't test that. I don't think you do, but I don't know. I don't think you do. You
Maybe.
auto attack 360. You auto attack 360 degrees right now, but I don't think you block 360 degrees. I'd be pretty. Let me just say something. I'd be pretty damn disappointed if you have a 360 block in this game because, like, come on, man.
Hey, look, it's a shield that surrounds me, dude. It just encircles me, or whatever you would say.
Okay, well, if you do have a 360 block, then sure, you can do cool stuff. If you don't have a 360 block, then probably not.
Okay. All right, I got a couple more questions. I'll just hit these because they were asked real quick. We'll be short on questions today just because we've been running a little bit over 3 hours and it's 1
Has it
a.m.
actually
here.
been 3 hours?
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude, you get Layla on your show and he doesn't shut up.
Oh, and you've talked most of the show, so I love it, dude. It's actually made
I should have got a water bottle.
Yeah, dude. Like I'm overly exhausted, so it's good for me that you had lots to say. I'm really happy that I love listening to you every time. Okay, Hannes. I don't know if to say his name. Hannes. I'm going to say it's Hannes. Sorry, dude. This is actually a question that was discussed a lot during the show. People are really upset about White Mage, and they feel like it's gone. It's gone for good. Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
So my thoughts are mostly what I've derived from talking to my healer friends about, and I'm not nearly as proficient with healers as I am tanks. So you're definitely going to want to like forward that question to somebody much more knowledgeable on the subject.
Mm-hmm.
However, some of the initial reactions that I've heard are, in terms of actual healing output, White Mage is still going to be pretty strong. When my friend was looking at Scholar this morning, he actually felt that in terms of healing output, Scholar might not be as desirable as something like White Mage. However, Scholar brings other things to a raid that are also really strong, like Chain Stratagem is stupidly good. But save that for a healer show if you ever want to do a healer show.
Yeah.
But I think I don't think White Mage is dead, but I can't say how alive it is. It's also very content dependent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it really depends on how much you need the White Mage's kit in content.
I mean, the same with
if you don't need what it offers, yeah, it's the same thing. If you don't need what it offers, then bring the higher DPS variant.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and Gainer 974 Klops. Since Dragoon is the only job with piercing, do you think they pretty much have a lock spot in mid to hardcore groups?
I don't think that at all. No. I mean, there's been plenty of tiers where teams didn't have a piercing debuff and they still ran a Bard or Machinist. I mean, that's not a staple at all. It all depends on the potencies of your raid as a whole. And I think back to Final Coil, we ran a double monk, and we still ran a Bard. Bard was there for a bit more utility and their mobility in terms of dealing with mechanics. And that was back when Bards, again, they have their utility, they have their mobility back. They can be highly mobile with mechanics again, and that's a big strength. And one of the reasons we liked Bard back in Final Coil was its ability to be mobile. Mm-hmm. And we didn't really care that it was we didn't have a piercing debuff for it. The double monk was what we wanted. So no, I don't think it's staple at all. I think that everything again comes down to potencies of your raid as a whole.
Yeah.
And we'll need to wait till probably, we can speculate now based on the tooltips we have, but I don't think we'll know for certain what is alive and what is dead until Stormblood launches, and hopefully the list of what is dead is very short.
Well, I mean, it's going to be. I mean, you have more jobs to choose from now, so we'll see how that works out. The thing that is going to be interesting. Well, I mean, I guess people are all looking at Dragoon like, hey, Dragoon's in there for your Bard and Machinist for A12S, right? That's not going to be really the scenario coming into Stormblood.
Yeah, my initial reaction to the healers, because I see a lot of healer discussion going on in chat. My initial reaction is yes, Astrology looks like it's in a pretty damn good spot. That's all I'm going to say on the matter for now.
Okay.
Talk to a real healer if you wanted an opinion beyond that. But yeah, Astrology looks like it's in a pretty damn good spot.
Okay, excellent. All right, I think that's pretty good with questions right now. Sorry I didn't get too deep in there, but I feel like our chat's been extremely good for today. It's been nice. It's been enjoyable, and I've been kind of out of the picture for a little while, so this has been a good refresher on everything that's coming in with Stormblood. So I appreciate you coming on and helping me out with that, Layla.
Hey man, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity you gave me to even make any of this possible. I'm glad I could help you out, and I'm just thrilled that I was able to be a part of the process and whatnot. And I welcome it at any time again in the future.
Of course, man. You've been amazing, and you did an amazing job. Remember, send me those notes, though. Send me the notes.
Yes, sure.
I need to.
I got you covered.
All right, and what I'll do is I'll type up the
I'll type
article.
them up. I'll type them up and send them to you.
Okay, cool. And for everyone out there, just a few announcements for people who like MogTalk in some way or another. We are coming back, not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, which will be the 10th. MogTalk will officially be back, hopefully on a more routine schedule. In my trip here in the Ukraine, this coming Saturday on the 3rd, so I'll be flying then. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. There are a lot of shows to be had. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Definitely need to be talking about PvP. We definitely need to be talking about healers coming into it. We definitely need to be talking about white mages for sure in that healer show. We need to talk about red mage, samurai, the changes to DPS that's coming out. I mean, there's tons, and we're not going to be able to hit it all before Stormblood happens. But we're going to try to hit a couple of key points before it actually does come about. The second part to all this is while I'm out here in Ukraine, I did join the wonderful membership of the Dream Team, and I appreciate them bringing me on board because I've
basically in the chat for Dream Frosty.
Dream Frosty. No, like so thought about it for a while, and I mean, kind of in the back of my head, I was like, yeah, these guys are actually people I appreciate a lot. I think I respect almost everyone there, and so that's most of the reason why, and they're all really cool people. So just to give you guys a heads up about that, mistakes were made. Yeah.
I'm sorry for embarrassing you, Mel.
Sorry.
I'll try to be less of an embarrassment in your life.
But yeah, no, definitely shout out to them and the team, and I'm glad to be a part of what they have going on. But yeah, that kind of wraps up this show for today. And again, Layla, thank you so much for coming on. Are there some shout outs you want to do before you get off the show?
Shout out to you, obviously, for putting on a great show again and giving me the opportunity, like I mentioned earlier. Shout out to all my friends on Final Fantasy and my members of my free company, Elysium. Thank you for a wonderful Heavensward experience. Heavensward is ending now. We're going into Stormblood, and I hope that everybody enjoys Stormblood as much as I have been able to enjoy the preview of it. And I hope that we all continue to grow and improve and keep advancing the game further as we go through a new expansion. So, and thank you for everything that my FC has done for me throughout Heavensward and all that jazz. Like to shout out Fold for being an excellent tweeter on and a master of shit posting variety. And if you are ever in the neighborhood and market for quality memes, please follow @FoldPlease on Twitter. If you want non-degenerate content, consider following @ClopsGG on Twitter. It's my personal gaming Twitter, and you can find whatever I'm streaming or doing stuff there. Follow the FC on Twitter if you want to see what Elysium's ever up to @Elysium FFXIV. And and follow Frosty on Twitch and Twitter.
Yes, do follow me. And did you say your Twitch?
Yeah, so I've changed. Yes, I have changed my Twitch and Twitter handle, mostly because I think a lot of my Twitter is these days it's like barely even 30% Final Fantasy related because I'm playing so many different games and doing so many different things that it didn't really make sense to just have my handle be Final Fantasy. So we're more broad now, and I just changed my Twitch to sort of reflect that.
Yeah. GG. Right.
GG.
All right, and guys, thank you all for watching. I appreciate you all coming out to see the show. It's sorry if it was a little bit shaky with the drop frames and everything else and the crash earlier, but that's the wireless internet I have right now here in Kiev, and hopefully when we get back on our next show, it's going to be a lot more stable. And also, thank you for everyone in chat that helped moderate, all the moderators out there. Thank you again, Layla and Blizana for doing the artwork. Thank you for Andre Kane for letting us do the music, which I will hopefully have attached to the video when it's uploaded. The last note I will say is we do have, I think, State of the Realm starting in like, what, 45 minutes?
Something like that. I thought it was, yeah, don't quote me.
Yeah, I think about 45 minutes here. And so I am going to go ahead and send a host in that direction. I don't think they're live yet, but they will be getting live soon, and they will be doing setup. I think they do pre-show usually. So 30 minutes to pre-show? Oh, man. Okay. Well, I am going to go ahead and do a host. Well, does it stick? Does that host stick after I do it if he's online?
If he's offline, I don't think it does, but
if it doesn't stick, then like it seems kind of.
Why don't you just check back in like 30 minutes and shoot him a host then?
Yeah, I can check back in 30 minutes. I can host somebody in the. Oh, it does stick. Okay, there we go.
It does stick. Okay. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and host him, so you guys can go over there and thank him very much for the host during this show. Guys, thank you again for watching, and until next time, be good, keep cool, and what should I do, Layla?
Stay cold.
Stay frosty, guys. Bye. Say bye.
I'm waving. I promise.
Bye.